not the bride you asked for?" Clara whispered as the stagecoach rattled toward her fate, clutching a letter addressed to someone else, her sister, the beautiful one, the chosen one. But Typhoid had other plans, or maybe God did. Now she wore Eloise's name like a borrowed coat, traveling west to marry a stranger who'd never know the difference. Unless he looked too closely. Unless his heart saw what her face couldn't hide. Unless love, that truest judge, declared her the fraud she was. Welcome to a story of wrong names and right hearts, where a desperate deception becomes the path to belonging. Stay with me until the very end. This journey gets darker before dawn breaks. And comment below with your city so I can see how far Clara's story has traveled across this world of ours. The September rain came down in sheets against the windows of the Whitmore house, each drop like a tiny fist demanding entry. Clara stood in the kitchen, her hands submerged in scalding dishwater, watching the storm through glass so old it warped the world beyond into something almost beautiful. Almost. But Clara had learned long ago not to trust beauty. It was a currency she didn't possess, a language she'd never been taught to speak. "Clara, get in here this instant!" Her stepmother's voice cut through the sound of rain like a blade through silk. Clara dried her reddened hands on her apron, the rough fabric catching on the calluses that marked her as what she was. The workhorse, the unwanted, the one who stayed in the kitchen while her half-sister Eloise held court in the parlor like a princess awaiting her crown. The hallway smelled of lavender water and beeswax, scents that belonged to Eloise's world, not hers. Clara's boots, old, patched twice over, left faint wet marks on the polished floor. She'd pay for that later, but then again, she always paid for something. Victoria Whitmore stood in the parlor doorway, a vision of calculated elegance in deep purple silk. At 43, she maintained the kind of beauty that required constant vigilance and considerable cruelty. Her eyes, pale blue and cold as a winter sky, fixed on Clara with the warmth of a butcher eyeing livestock. "Close the door," Victoria commanded. "What I'm about to say doesn't leave this room." Clara obeyed, her heart beginning a slow, dreadful climb up her throat. Nothing good ever began with those words. Behind her stepmother, she could see the parlor in all its careful glory. The imported carpet, the velvet settee where Eloise spent her afternoons reading romance novels and sighing prettily, the portraits of Whitmores long dead, who seemed to stare down at Clara with the same disappointment the living ones did. "There's been a development," Victoria began, settling herself onto the settee with the careful arrangement of her skirts that suggested she'd rehearsed this moment. "Regarding your sister's future." Clara said nothing. Her father had taught her that, before the consumption took him 3 years ago, when in doubt, stay silent and listen. It was one of the few gifts he'd managed to give her before Victoria had isolated him in his final months, whispering poison about Clara being ungrateful, burdensome, strange. As you know, we arranged for Eloise to travel west as a mail-order bride to a rancher in Wyoming territory, a Mr. Elias Grant of Willow Ridge, a widower with significant property and a respectable name. Victoria's lips pressed into a thin line. However, circumstances have changed. Clara's fingers found each other behind her back, twisting together like roots seeking purchase in stony soil. She knew that tone. Something had gone wrong, which meant someone had to be punished, which usually meant her. "Eloise has fallen ill. The doctor confirms it's typhoid fever." The words hit Clara like cold water. Will she? Don't be dramatic. It's a mild case. She'll recover fully with proper rest and care. But she certainly cannot travel for at least 6 weeks, possibly 8. Victoria smoothed an invisible wrinkle from her skirt. "Mr. Grant is expecting his bride in 2 weeks' time. He's already made the arrangements, already paid the passage, already prepared his home. We cannot simply inform him of a delay. Men of his station don't wait patiently like dogs at a door." His mind worked slowly through the implications, like fingers working through a complicated knot. "You'll write to him. Explain the situation. Surely he'll understand that we'll do no such thing." Victoria's eyes snapped to hers, sharp as broken glass. "Do you have any idea how difficult it was to secure this match? Eloise is beautiful, yes, but she has no dowry beyond what her father left, which amounts to very little after maintaining appearances in this town. Grant could have his pick of educated, wealthy girls from good Eastern families. Instead, he chose simplicity. He chose someone who could run a frontier household, someone who wouldn't complain about hard work. The knot in Clara's stomach pulled tighter. She knew where this was going. She'd known from the moment Victoria closed the door. "Someone like you," Victoria finished, her voice dropping to something almost gentle, which was somehow worse than her usual cruelty. "You're going in her place." The room seemed to tilt slightly, the portraits on the walls sliding sideways before righting themselves. "I couldn't possibly—" "You can, and you will." Victoria rose, moving toward Clara with the predatory grace of a cat approaching a cornered mouse. "You'll travel under Eloise's name. You'll present yourself as Eloise Whitmore, and you'll marry Elias Grant before he realizes the substitution." "That's fraud. It's wrong. When he discovers, if he discovers, you'll already be married. What's he going to do? Send you back? Demand a refund?" Victoria laughed, a sound like breaking crystal. "Men don't want complications, Clara. They want a clean house, warm meals, and someone to fill the cold spaces in their beds. You can do all of that as well as Eloise could. Better, probably, since you actually know how to work." Clara's voice came out smaller than she intended. "But I don't look anything like—" He's never seen Eloise. Their courtship was conducted entirely through letters. Victoria gestured dismissively. "Letters I wrote, if we're being honest. Eloise can barely spell affection, much less compose a paragraph about it. I crafted her into exactly what Grant said he wanted. A woman of modest temperament, practical skills, and simple faith. You fit that description better than she ever could." The rain hammered harder against the windows, as if trying to break through, trying to drown them all. Clara felt the walls of the room pressing in, squeezing the air from her lungs. "I won't do it. You can't make me lie to a man, trap him into a marriage based on—" Victoria's hand caught her chin, forcing Clara to meet those ice-blue eyes. The grip was firm enough to hurt, gentle enough to leave no mark. She'd perfected the balance over years of invisible cruelties. "Listen very carefully, Clara Whitmore. Your father is dead. This house belongs to me. You have no money, no prospects, no family who wants you. If you refuse this, I'll have you out by morning with nothing but the dress on your back. Where will you go? What will you do?" Victoria's smile was terrible. "At least in Wyoming, you'll have a roof. At least you'll have a purpose. And who knows, maybe you'll finally become someone's first choice instead of their last resort." The words landed like stones, each one heavy with a truth Clara couldn't deny. She had nowhere to go. No relatives who'd take her in, no skills that could earn her living wage, no beauty that might secure her a different match. She was 23 years old and invisible, the kind of woman people's eyes slid past without registering. "And Eloise?" Clara whispered. "What happens to her?" "Once she's recovered, we'll tell people she decided against frontier life, that she's chosen to pursue other opportunities. In 6 months, perhaps a year, we'll introduce her to society properly. Find her a match here, someone who can appreciate her delicacy." Victoria released Clara's chin, stepping back. "You'll be doing her a favor, really. Eloise was never suited for the hardship of ranch life. You, on the other hand, were practically bred for drudgery." The casual cruelty of it stole Clara's breath. All her life, she'd known she was unwanted, but hearing it spoken so plainly was different. It confirmed what she'd always suspected. She was nothing more than a useful object to be deployed when needed, discarded when convenient. "I need an answer, Clara. Tonight." Clara turned to the window, watching the rain remake the world into watercolor impressions. Somewhere out there, beyond this suffocating house, beyond this town where she'd never belonged, was Wyoming. A territory she couldn't imagine, a man she'd never met, a life that was meant for someone else but might, just might, have room for her. What choice did she really have? Stay here and be slowly crushed under Victoria's thumb until she withered into nothing? Or take a chance on a lie that might, against all odds, transform into something true? "What does the letter say?" Clara heard herself ask. "The one Mr. Grant sent. What kind of man is he?" Victoria moved to the writing desk, producing a folded sheet of paper from the drawer. The handwriting was firm, clear, masculine. Clara read, "Dear Miss Whitmore, I am not a man given to flowery speech, so I will be plain. I need a wife. My daughter needs a mother. My home needs tending. In return, I offer security, respect, subject, and honest work. I cannot promise passion. I buried that with my first wife. But I can promise shelter from storms, food on your table, and protection under my name. If you can accept a life of hard work and simple pleasures, if you can love a child not your own, if you value character over romance, then Willow Ridge can become your home. I await your answer with hope tempered by caution. Yours in honesty, Elias Grant. Clara read it twice, then 3 times, her fingers trembling slightly against the paper. The words were spare but not unkind. There was a dignity to them, a weariness that resonated somewhere deep in her chest. He didn't promise love or happiness, he promised shelter. After years of sleeping in the coldest room of the house, eating what was left after others had their fill, wearing dresses mended until they were more patched than original fabric, the promise of shelter felt like a benediction. He sounds lonely, Clara said quietly. He sounds practical, which makes this arrangement perfect. Victoria retrieved the letter, tucking it back in the drawer. The stagecoach leaves in 2 weeks. That gives us time to alter Eloise's traveling clothes to fit you. You're nearly the same height, even if you lack her figure. We'll coach you on the details she included in her letters. You'll need to study them, memorize them. As far as Elias Grant knows, you are Eloise Whitmore, 21 years old, fond of piano music and poetry, skilled in all domestic arts. But I can't play piano. I've never even... Then let's hope his ranch doesn't have one. Victoria's smile was sharp. The point is, Clara, you'll become whoever you need to be. You've spent your whole life making yourself smaller, quieter, less. Now you'll do the opposite. You'll become Eloise, the pretty one, the charming one, the one people actually want. The cruelty of it was almost admirable in its precision. Clara wasn't just being sent away, she was being erased, replaced with a prettier story. And if I fail, if he discovers the truth? Victoria shrugged, a gesture of practiced indifference. Then you'll have to be very convincing or very useful. Either way, you'll be his problem, not mine. The choice stretched before Clara like a dark road with no visible end. Behind her was certain misery, years of invisible servitude until Victoria finally cast her out to starve, or worse. Ahead was uncertain misery, a marriage built on lies, a man who'd been deceived, a child who deserved better than a fraudulent mother. But ahead also held possibility. The faintest, most fragile possibility that maybe, just maybe, she could make herself into something true, even if she began with a lie. That maybe this Elias Grant, with his honest words and his lonely daughter, might see past the deception to whatever worth Clara actually possessed, if she possessed any at all. "I'll do it," Clara said, her voice barely audible over the rain. "I'll go." Victoria's smile was triumphant but brief, as if she'd never doubted the outcome. "Excellent. We'll begin preparations tomorrow. In the meantime, you should start thinking of yourself as Eloise. Practice in the mirror. Perfect her smile, that soft, vacant look she has. It's quite effective on men." Clara nodded numbly, already feeling herself split into 2 people, the Clara who was being left behind, and the Eloise she'd have to become. A ghost and an imposter, wrapped in the same skin. That night, unable to sleep, Clara crept into Eloise's room. Her half-sister lay in the large bed, pale and sweating, her beautiful face slackened by fever. Even diminished by illness, Eloise was lovely. Delicate features, golden hair spread across the pillow like a halo, hands so small and soft they looked like they'd never known a moment's work. Clara stood in the doorway, watching the shallow rise and fall of Eloise's chest. They shared a father but might as well have been from different species. Where Eloise was gold and porcelain, Clara was earth and iron. Where Eloise attracted kindness like flowers attract bees, Clara seemed to repel it, as if marked from birth with some invisible stain. "I'm sorry," Clara whispered to the sleeping figure. Though she wasn't sure what she was apologizing for, taking Eloise's place or being grateful for the chance to escape. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of preparation that felt more like erasure. Victoria drilled her relentlessly on the contents of the letters. Eloise's supposed love of Keats and Wordsworth. Clara had to read 3 volumes in 4 days. Her skill at needlepoint, her fingers bled from the crash course. Her gentle nature and tender heart, the hardest thing to fake. They altered Eloise's traveling dress, taking it in at the waist where Clara was narrower, letting it out slightly at the shoulders where years of work had made her broader. The deep blue wool was the finest thing Clara had ever worn, and it felt like a costume, like playing dress-up in another woman's skin. "Remember," Victoria coached, adjusting the hat that kept sliding too far down Clara's forehead, "you are gentle, soft-spoken, a little fragile. Men like Grant want to protect something. Give him that." Clara nodded, practicing the demure smile in the mirror, watching it sit wrong on her face. She wasn't built for delicacy. Her jaw was too strong, her eyes too direct, her hands too capable. But she'd learn. She had to. The morning of departure arrived too quickly, and not quickly enough. Clara stood in the entryway with a single carpet bag containing Eloise's clothes, Eloise's Bible, Eloise's life. Victoria inspected her one final time, circling like a general reviewing troops. "You'll do," she said finally. "Not perfect, but adequate. Try to smile more." Men respond to that. "Yes, ma'am." "And Clara?" Victoria's voice stopped her at the door. "Don't come back. Whatever happens out there, you make it work. There's no place for you here anymore. There never really was." Clara nodded, throat too tight for words. Even cruelty, when it confirmed what you'd always known, carried a strange comfort. At least it was honest. The stagecoach station was busy with travelers and well-wishers. Clara stood apart from the crowd, clutching her bag, wearing a face that wasn't hers. The driver called for boarding, and she climbed inside, settling into the corner seat. As the stage lurched into motion, Clara caught one final glimpse of Colorado Springs. The town where she'd never belonged, the house where she'd never been wanted, the life that had never quite fit. She pressed her palm against the window glass, a gesture that might have been goodbye or good riddance, or simply an acknowledgement that this version of herself was being left behind like an outgrown dress. "First time west?" asked a fellow passenger, an older woman with kind eyes and worn gloves. Clara turned, remembering to smile softly, to be Eloise. "Yes, ma'am. I'm traveling to Wyoming, to be married." "How exciting! You must be nervous." Nervous didn't begin to cover it. Terrified was closer. Unmoored was probably most accurate. But Clara, no, Eloise, she had to remember. She was Eloise now, simply nodded and gazed out the window. The landscape changed gradually as they traveled, the familiar mountains giving way to endless plains that stretched like an ocean of grass. Clara had never seen so much emptiness, so much sky. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure, all that space, all that possibility for someone to either get lost or found. At night, lying in uncomfortable stage stops and cheap hotels, Clara would take out the letter from Elias Grant and read it again by candlelight. "I cannot promise passion. I buried that with my first wife. But I can promise shelter from storms." She'd memorized every word by now, but she kept reading it anyway, trying to imagine the man behind the careful script. Was he kind? Was he cruel? Would he be furious when he realized, as he inevitably would, that he'd been deceived? Or would he understand that sometimes people became liars simply because truth had no room for them? The journey took 5 days, each mile carrying Clara further from who she'd been and closer to who she'd have to become. She practiced Eloise's mannerisms until they felt almost natural, the way she ducked her head when spoken to, the soft laugh, the helpless gestures that suggested she couldn't possibly manage anything difficult on her own. It felt like dying slowly, this shedding of self. But maybe that's what transformation required, a kind of death before rebirth. On the morning of the 6th day, the driver called out, "Willow Ridge, dead ahead!" Clara's heart stuttered. She pressed closer to the window, straining for her first glimpse of the place that would either become home or prison. The town was smaller than she'd imagined. A handful of buildings clustered around a main street, with ranches scattered across the surrounding hills like seeds thrown by a careless hand. The mountains rose in the distance, still capped with early snow despite it being September. The air, when the stage door opened, was thin and sharp and clean in a way that made her lungs ache. "Miss Whitmore?" A man approached, middle-aged, balding, with a sheriff's star pinned to his vest. "Miss Eloise Whitmore?" The false name still felt strange in her ears, but Clara nodded. "Yes, that's me. Sheriff Tom Mitchell. Elias asked me to meet you, bring you out to the ranch. He's finishing up some business with a cattle buyer, but he'll be along shortly." The The sheriff's smile was warm and genuine. "Welcome to Willow Ridge, miss. We don't get many new folks, especially not pretty ones. You're going to cause quite a stir." Pretty. The word sat wrong on Clara's shoulders like an ill-fitting coat, but she smiled. Eloise's smile, soft and demure, and let the sheriff help her into a wagon. The ride out to the ranch took 30 minutes, following a rough road that cut through land so vast it made Clara feel impossibly small. Cattle dotted the hillsides, and once she saw a hawk circling overhead, riding currents she couldn't see. "Elias is a good man," Sheriff Mitchell said, breaking the silence. "Lost his wife 2 years back. Sarah was a fine woman. Everyone loved her. It about broke him when the fever took her. Left him with little Rosie, just 4 years old at the time. He's done his best, but a child needs a mother. That's the truth of it." Clara's throat tightened. A child. A little girl who'd lost her mother and was about to get an imposter instead. The guilt sat in her stomach like spoiled food. "Does she— Rosie, I mean. Does she know I'm coming?" "Oh, yes. She's been counting down the days, drew you pictures, picked wildflowers for your room. She's so excited she can barely sleep." The sheriff glanced at her. "She's a sweet thing. Shy around strangers, but warms up quick. You'll love her." Each word was a weight added to the burden Clara carried. This wasn't just about deceiving a man. It was about deceiving a child who'd already lost so much. A child who deserved the truth. Not another loss disguised as a gift. The ranch house appeared over a rise, and Clara's breath caught. It wasn't grand, but it was solid. A 2-story structure of weathered wood and stone, with a wraparound porch and smoke curling from the chimney. Outbuildings dotted the property, a barn, a chicken coop, what looked like a bunkhouse. Signs of life and work and care. Signs of home. "Here we are," Sheriff Mitchell announced, pulling the wagon to a stop. "Willow Ridge Ranch, your new home, Miss Whitmore." Before Clara could respond, the front door burst open and a small figure came tearing out. A little girl with dark braids and a gap-toothed smile, dressed in a blue calico dress that had been carefully mended at the hem. "Is that her?" the child called. "Is that my new mama?" Clara's heart cracked straight down the middle. Sheriff Mitchell helped her down from the wagon, and suddenly Clara was standing face to face with Rosie Grant, 6 years old and looking at her like she hung the moon. "Hello?" Clara managed, her voice unsteady. "You must be Rosie." The little girl nodded solemnly, then thrust forward a handful of wilted wildflowers, purple asters and golden rabbit brush, tied together with string. "I picked these for you. Papa said you'd like them." Clara accepted the flowers like they were made of spun glass, feeling tears prick her eyes. "They're beautiful, the most beautiful flowers I've ever received." It was true. No one had ever given her flowers before. Rosie's face split into a grin that rivaled the sun. "I knew you'd be nice. I prayed and prayed, and I told God I needed a mama who'd be nice, and He sent you." The words were arrows, each one finding their mark. Clara knelt down so she was eye level with the child, taking in the hope shining in those dark eyes. Eyes that probably looked like her mother's, like the woman Clara could never replace. "I'm glad I'm here," Clara said softly. And despite everything, despite the lies and the fear and the impossible situation, she meant it. "Come on." Rosie grabbed her hand with the casual trust of childhood. "I'll show you everything. Papa fixed up the best room for you, and I made a picture to hang on your wall, and tomorrow we can go see the chickens, and I'll teach you all their names." Clara let herself be pulled toward the house, the sheriff following with her bag. And for just a moment, one brief, shining moment, she let herself imagine that this could work, that maybe she could become the person this child needed, that maybe a lie told for long enough, with enough love, could transform into truth. The house was warm inside, smelling of wood smoke and coffee and something baking. The furniture was simple but well made, the floors scrubbed clean, curtains hanging straight in the windows. It was the kind of home that spoke of care, of someone who paid attention to details, even when tired. "Mrs. Halloway," Rosie called. "She's here. The new mama's here." An older woman emerged from the kitchen, wiping flour-covered hands on her apron. She had steel-gray hair and a face that had earned every wrinkle through hard living and honest laughter. "So you're the famous Miss Whitmore," she said, looking Clara up and down with eyes that seemed to see straight through skin to whatever lay beneath. I'm Sarah Halloway. I help out here a few times a week, cooking and such. Elias wanted everything perfect for your arrival. It's lovely, Clara said, and meant it. Thank you for... The sound of horses stopped her. Heavy hoofbeats approaching fast, then stopping. The creak of leather, the jingle of spurs. Rosie ran to the window. Papa's home! Clara's heart began to pound so hard she could feel it in her throat. This was it. The moment when the lie either held or shattered. She smoothed her skirt with trembling hands, tried to arrange her face into something welcoming and soft and not terrified. The door opened. Elias Grant stepped inside, and Clara's first thought was that the letters hadn't prepared her. He was tall, easily over 6 feet, with broad shoulders that spoke of years of hard physical labor, dark hair touched with gray at the temples, tanned skin marked with sun and wind, hands that looked like they could break stones or gentle a frightened horse with equal skill. But it was his eyes that stopped her. Blue as a mountain lake, and carrying the same kind of depth, like if you looked too long, you might fall in and never find your way out. Those eyes found her across the room, and Clara felt the weight of his gaze like a physical thing. Miss Whitmore, he said, his voice deeper than she'd imagined, rougher. You made it safely. Yes, she managed. Thank you for sending the sheriff. The journey was long, but... Papa! Rosie crashed into his legs, wrapping her small arms around his waist. Isn't she perfect? Isn't she exactly what we prayed for? Something flickered in Elias's expression. Tenderness mixed with sorrow, mixed with something Clara couldn't name. He looked at his daughter with such fierce love it hurt to witness. She's very lovely, he said carefully. Then, to Clara, I hope the house meets your approval. It's not fancy, but it's sturdy. You'll be safe here. Safe. There was that word again. He kept promising safety, like it was the greatest gift he could offer. And maybe, for someone like Clara who'd never known it, it was. It's more than I expected, Clara said honestly. Truly, Mrs. Halloway bustled forward. Well, the girl must be exhausted from her travels. Rosie, let's give your papa and Miss Whitmore a moment to speak. We'll set out the supper. Rosie protested, but was gently steered toward the kitchen. The sheriff had already excused himself, and suddenly Clara stood alone in the parlor with the man she'd traveled across 2 territories to marry under a name that wasn't hers. Elias removed his hat, turning it in his hands, a nervous gesture that made him seem suddenly more human, less intimidating. I'm not good with pretty words, he said. Never have been. So I'll just say it plain. I'm grateful you came. I know it wasn't easy, leaving everything familiar. Coming to a place you've never seen, to a man you've never met. It was brave, Clara found herself saying. Or desperate. I'm not sure which. A hint of a smile crossed his face, there and gone like sun through clouds. Brave and desperate often look the same from certain angles. He moved to the window, gazing out at the land. I want to be clear about what this is, Miss Whitmore. What I can and can't offer. I had a marriage built on love once. Lightning doesn't strike the same place twice. What I'm offering you is partnership, respect, a home where you'll be valued for your work and your character, not ornamental prettiness. Each word was a stone building a foundation, and Clara felt herself standing on something solid for the first time in years. That's all I want, she said quietly. To be useful. To matter. He turned back to her, those blue eyes searching her face. You matter already. Rosie's been half wild with excitement. She's drawn you into every prayer for months. You're already real to her, already loved. I just hope... He paused, seeming to gather courage. I hope the reality of life here doesn't disappoint you. It's hard work, Miss Whitmore. Early mornings, late nights, weather that'll freeze you in winter and bake you in summer. I'll work beside you when I can, but ranch life is demanding. If you're expecting leisure and comfort... I'm not, Clara interrupted, then caught herself, remembering to soften. I mean, I understand. I'm willing to work. I want to earn my place here. Something in his expression shifted, a guardedness easing slightly. Then we'll get along just fine. The wedding's set for Saturday. That gives you a few days to settle in. Change your mind if you need to. I won't change my mind. Good. He set his hat on the table. Because truth is, Miss Whitmore, I'm trusting you with the most precious thing I have, my daughter. She's already lost one mother. I need to know. No, I need to trust that you'll stay, that you won't run when things get hard. The irony of him asking for trust while she stood before him wearing another woman's name nearly broke Clara's composure. The guilt rose up like bile, burning. I promise, she said, and at least that much was true. I'll stay. I won't leave her. Elias nodded, satisfied, not knowing he'd just accepted a vow from a liar. Then welcome home, Eloise Whitmore. May Willow Ridge be good to you. Eloise. The false name hung in the air between them like smoke. Clara wanted to correct him, wanted to fall to her knees and confess everything, the deception, the desperation, the truth of who she really was. But Rosie's laughter drifted from the kitchen, bright and full of hope, and Clara knew she couldn't. Not yet. Maybe not ever. She'd come here as the wrong bride. Now she'd have to find a way to become the right one, even if it meant losing herself entirely in the process. The first morning at Willow Ridge, Clara woke before dawn to the sound of roosters and the low murmur of men's voices drifting up from the yard below. For a confused moment, she didn't know where she was. The bed was too comfortable, the quilt too fine, the room too warm. Then memory crashed over her like cold water, and she remembered. Wyoming. The ranch. The lie she was living. She dressed quickly in the dim light, choosing one of Eloise's simpler dresses, a gray cotton that wouldn't show dirt. Her fingers fumbled with the tiny buttons at her wrists, still unused to such delicate fastenings. At home, no, not home anymore. That place had never been home. She'd worn dresses held together with straight pins and determination. The house was quiet as she crept downstairs, trying not to wake Rosie, whose small room was right next to hers. The kitchen was cold, the stove unlit, and Clara felt a flutter of relief. Here, at least, was something she understood. Work. Purpose. A way to prove she belonged. She had the fire going and coffee brewing by the time the sun began painting the eastern sky pink and gold. The kitchen came alive around her as she worked, finding the flour, the eggs, the salt. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency, mixing biscuit dough, slicing bacon, setting the table for 4. Mrs. Halloway wouldn't arrive until mid-morning, which meant breakfast was Clara's to manage. She was sliding the first pan of biscuits into the oven when she heard footsteps on the stairs. Heavy, measured, a man's tread. Her heart quickened as Elias appeared in the doorway, dressed for work in canvas pants and a shirt that had been washed so many times the blue had faded to almost gray. He stopped short when he saw her, surprise flickering across his face. "You're up early." "Ranches don't run on city hours," Clara said, then caught herself. Eloise wouldn't know that. Eloise had never worked a day in her life. She softened her voice, added uncertainty. "At least I assumed. I thought you'd need breakfast before." "I do," Elias interrupted, moving to the coffee pot. He poured himself a cup, took a long drink, and something in his shoulders eased. "This is good. Strong. Sarah used to—" He stopped himself, cleared his throat. "Most women from back east can't make decent coffee. They brew it weak as tea." Clara felt a small surge of triumph. "My father liked it strong. I learned to make it the way he preferred." It was true, even if everything else about her was a lie. Her father, in those last years before Victoria had completely isolated him, had taught her small things. How to brew coffee that could wake the dead. How to read the weather in the clouds. How to find the North Star when you were lost. "He taught you well." Elias sat at the table, cradling the cup in both hands. In the growing light, Clara could see the lines around his eyes, the silver threading his dark hair. He couldn't be more than 35, but he wore his years like a heavy coat. "I've been managing breakfast myself since Mrs. Halloway can't come before 8, usually just cold biscuits from the day before. This is—" He gestured at the stove, the bacon sizzling. "This is more than I expected." "I like being useful," Clara said, and heard the raw honesty in her own voice. She turned back to the stove before he could see too much in her face. They ate in comfortable silence when the food was ready, and Clara found herself relaxing slightly. Elias wasn't a talker, didn't fill silence with pointless chatter. He ate with the single-minded focus of a man who burned more calories than most people consumed, and he cleaned his plate twice. You're a good cook, he said finally, pushing back from the table. Better than good. Rosie's going to think she died and went to heaven when she tastes those biscuits. Clara felt warmth bloom in her chest, unfamiliar and sweet. Praise. When was the last time someone had praised her work, instead of just expecting it? Thank you, she managed. I'll have supper ready by 6, if that suits. Suits fine. Elias stood, reaching for his hat. I'll be out with the cattle most of the day. Fence repair in the north pasture. If you need anything at all, ring the bell on the porch. 3 rings means trouble. Someone will come. He was almost out the door when Clara found her voice. Elias? He turned and she saw the slight surprise in his eyes. She'd used his given name without thinking, too familiar for a woman who'd known him less than a day. I just wanted to say thank you for giving me this chance. I know you could have chosen anyone, and I chose you, he said simply. Or you chose me. Either way, we're in this together now. His eyes held hers for a moment longer than necessary. Besides, Rosie's already decided you're an angel sent straight from heaven. Breaking her heart isn't something I'm prepared to do. Then he was gone, the door closing softly behind him, leaving Clara alone with the weight of his words and the enormity of her deception. The days fell into rhythm with surprising ease. Clara rose before dawn and worked until long after dark, throwing herself into the business of running the household with an intensity that bordered on desperation. If she worked hard enough, proved herself valuable enough, maybe the lie wouldn't matter so much. Maybe she could earn the name she'd stolen. Mrs. Halloway watched her with knowing eyes, saying little but missing nothing. On the 3rd day, as they worked side by side, preserving the last of the summer vegetables, the older woman finally spoke. You're running from something. Clara's hand stilled over the tomatoes she was blanching. I don't know what you mean. Sure you do. Mrs. Halloway kept cutting, her knife moving with practiced efficiency. I've seen plenty of mail-order brides come through these parts, some running towards something, some running away. You're the running away kind. Clara's throat tightened. Does it matter as long as I do the work? Matters to Elias, matters to that little girl. The knife paused, and Mrs. Halloway's eyes, gray as winter sky, found Clara's. They've been hurt enough, lost enough. If you're going to run, do it now before they get attached, before Rosie starts calling you mama and meaning it. The words hit like a slap, all the worse for being deserved. Clara set down the tomato she'd been holding, her hands shaking slightly. I'm not going to run, she said quietly. Whatever I'm running from, it's not here. And whatever I'm running toward, maybe it is. Mrs. Halloway studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. See that you remember that when things get hard. Because they will get hard, girl. Winter here can break a person. Isolation can drive you half mad. And living with grief... She glanced toward the window, where Elias was visible working in the corral. That man loved his wife something fierce. You'll always be living in her shadow. I know, Clara whispered. I'm not trying to replace her. I'm just trying to... Belong? Mrs. Halloway finished. Well, belonging takes time. And truth. You remember that. The conversation haunted Clara for days afterward, particularly the part about truth. She'd never felt more fraudulent than when Rosie would take her hand, chattering about anything and everything, calling her Miss Eloise with such trust it physically hurt. The child followed her everywhere, a small shadow in calico dresses, eager to help with every task. She was particularly fascinated by the chickens, which she'd named with the serious deliberation of a general naming troops. That's Henrietta, Rosie explained, pointing to a fat red hen. She's bossy, but she lays the best eggs. And that's Margaret and Sally and Queen Victoria. Papa let me name her even though he said it was treasonous. Clara couldn't help but laugh. Queen Victoria, the chicken? She acts like royalty, Rosie said solemnly. She won't eat unless the food is scattered just right. They were collecting eggs together, Rosie's small basket already half full, when the child asked the question Clara had been dreading. Did you have chickens at your old home? Clara's hands froze on the egg she'd been reaching for. Victoria's coaching echoed in her mind. Eloise had lived in town, in a fine house with servants, never touched a chicken in her life. But the lie stuck in her throat like a bone. Yes, she heard herself say, we had chickens, I used to collect the eggs every morning before school. It was true. In the years before her father remarried, they'd kept chickens in the small yard behind their modest house. Clara had loved those early mornings, the quiet ritual of gathering eggs, the way the hens would cluck softly as if sharing secrets. Rosie beamed. I knew it! I knew you'd understand about chickens. Papa tries, but he doesn't really get it. He thinks they're just for eating and eggs. But they're more than that, aren't they? They are, Clara agreed, warmth flooding her chest. They have personalities, opinions. They're quite remarkable when you pay attention. Exactly. Rosie clutched her basket tighter, looking at Clara like she'd revealed the secrets of the universe. I'm so glad God sent you. My real mama. She paused, and something complicated crossed her small face. My first mama, I mean. She understood about chickens, too. Clara's heart clenched. Tell me about her, your first mama. Rosie was quiet for a moment, carefully placing an egg in her basket. She smelled like roses, and she sang songs in the morning, happy songs that made Papa laugh. She used to dance with me in the kitchen when we were making bread. Her voice got smaller. Then she got sick, and the smells hurt her, and she stopped singing. Papa says she's in heaven now, watching over us. I'm sure she is, Clara said softly, and I'm sure she'd be proud of what a wonderful helper you are. Do you think... Rosie hesitated, biting her lip. Do you think she'd like you? Do you think she'd be glad you came to take care of us? The question pierced Clara straight through. What would Sarah Grant think of the imposter living in her house, sleeping in her room, mothering her daughter under a false name? I hope so, Clara managed. I hope she'd understand that I'm trying my best. Rosie nodded seriously, then slipped her small hand into Clara's. I think she would. I think she asked God to send someone good, and he sent you. Clara had to turn away, blinking back tears, overcome by the crushing weight of undeserved faith. That evening, as she was preparing supper, Elias came in earlier than usual. He washed up at the pump outside, then stood in the doorway watching her work with an expression she couldn't quite read. Something wrong? Clara asked, wiping her hands on her apron. No, just... He moved into the kitchen, his presence somehow making the spacious room feel smaller. Rosie tells me you knew about chickens, that you kept them at your home back in Colorado. Clara's heart stuttered. Here it was, the first test of her lie. Victoria had said Eloise lived in town, in comfort. Chickens didn't fit that story. Yes, we had a small flock before... She scrambled for words. Before we moved to a larger house, when I was younger. It was close enough to truth to feel less like a lie. They had lived in a smaller house before Victoria, before everything changed. Elias nodded slowly. Your letters, they painted a picture of a more genteel upbringing, piano lessons and poetry. But the woman I'm seeing, you work like someone who's known labor. You don't hold a knife like someone who just learned. You know your way around a kitchen like you've lived in one. Clara's mouth went dry. This was it. He'd figured it out. He knew. I don't mean it as criticism, Elias continued, his voice careful. Truth is, it's a relief. I was worried I'd gotten myself some fragile city girl who'd break under the first real work. But you... He gestured at the kitchen, at the evidence of her competence. You're stronger than your letters suggested. I'm grateful for it. The irony wasn't lost on Clara. He was grateful for the very things that proved she wasn't who she claimed to be. People are complicated, she said quietly. We contain multitudes. Isn't that what the poets say? I suppose they do. Elias moved to the table, sat heavily like the day had worn him down to bones. The wedding's tomorrow. Judge Morrison's coming out after breakfast. Simple ceremony. Just us, Mrs. Halloway, and a couple hands for witnesses. Unless you want something different. Something more. No, Clara interrupted quickly. Simple is perfect. I don't want any fuss. The truth was, the smaller the ceremony, the less attention paid, the less chance someone might see through her disguise. Though who here would know Eloise from Clara? She was safe, or as safe as someone living a lie could ever be. Good. Elias's shoulders relaxed slightly. I thought about getting you a ring, but I didn't know what you'd like. Figured we could go into town next week, let you choose something yourself. The consideration in the gesture made Clara's chest tight. You don't have to I want to. His eyes met hers, steady and serious. I want you to have something that's yours, something you chose. Marriage is... He paused, seeming to gather words. Marriage is complicated enough without adding resentment. I want you to feel like this is your choice, your home, not a prison. Clara had to look away from the earnestness in his face. He was offering her freedom while she was offering him deception. The unfairness of it sat in her stomach like stones. Thank you, she whispered. That means more than you know. That night, Clara couldn't sleep. She stood at her window, watching moonlight paint the ranch silver in shadow. Tomorrow she'd become Mrs. Elias Grant, binding herself to this man and this life with vows that should have been sacred but would be tainted by the lie at their foundation. She should tell him. Should confess everything before it was too late. Give him the chance to send her away, to find a bride who came with truth instead of deception. But then she thought of Rosie's small hand in hers, the way the child looked at her like she hung the stars, the way Elias had relaxed over these past days, as if some burden he'd been carrying had finally eased, the way even crusty Mrs. Halloway had started leaving out 2 cups at morning coffee time, one for herself, one for Clara, like she belonged. For the first time in her life, Clara belonged somewhere, was wanted, made a difference. Could she really give that up for the luxury of truth? The wedding morning dawned clear and cold, the first real bite of autumn in the air. Clara dressed in her best dress, still Eloise's, everything was Eloise's, a deep green wool that brought out the hazel in her eyes. Mrs. Halloway had brought wildflowers, and together they arranged them in Clara's hair while Rosie watched, bouncing with excitement. You look like a princess, the child breathed. Papa's going to think you're so beautiful. Clara studied herself in the mirror, barely recognizing the woman looking back. With her hair arranged prettily, wearing a fine dress, flowers tucked behind her ear, she almost looked like she could be the bride a man might choose. Almost looked like she deserved this. Almost. The ceremony was brief, conducted in the parlor with autumn sunlight streaming through the windows. Judge Morrison, a weathered man with kind eyes and an impressive mustache, read the vows in a voice that suggested he'd done this hundreds of times. Do you, Elias James Grant, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife? I do. His voice was steady, certain. Clara risked a glance at him and found him watching her with an expression she couldn't name. Not love, not yet, but something like hope. Like maybe this could work. And do you, Eloise Marie Whitmore, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband? The false name echoed through the room like a bell tolling. Clara's throat closed around the words, the lie too big to swallow. She felt the weight of every eye on her, Mrs. Halloway's knowing gaze, Rosie's eager hope, the ranch hands shuffling uncomfortably in their Sunday best. Elias's hand found hers, warm and calloused and solid. Real, an anchor in a storm of her own making. I do, she whispered. Then by the power vested in me by the territory of Wyoming, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Mr. Grant, you may kiss your bride. Elias leaned down slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. His lips brushed hers, soft, brief, almost chaste. But even that small contact sent electricity through Clara's veins. He tasted like coffee and mint, and when he pulled back, something in his eyes had shifted, warmed. Mrs. Grant, he said quietly, and Clara felt the name settle over her like a cloak. Not Clara, not Eloise. Mrs. Grant. A third identity to add to her collection. Rosie launched herself at them both, wrapping her small arms around their legs. I have a mama again. I have a real mama. The celebration was simple. Cake that Mrs. Halloway had made, coffee and cider, toasts from the ranch hands who shuffled forward one by one to offer awkward congratulations. Clara smiled until her face hurt, accepted well wishes she didn't deserve, played the role of blushing bride with a skill that would have impressed even Victoria. But through it all, she felt Elias watching her, studying her like a puzzle he was trying to solve. As evening fell and the guests departed, Clara found herself alone in the kitchen, washing dishes and fighting the urge to run. She was married now, bound by law and God, and the trust of a child who'd already lost one mother. There was no going back. You don't have to do that tonight. She turned to find Elias in the doorway, jacket removed, sleeves rolled up. He looked tired but not unhappy. "I don't mind," Clara said. "It helps me think." "What are you thinking about?" Everything, nothing, the enormity of what she'd done, the impossibility of sustaining this lie forever. "Just wondering if I remembered to check the chickens," she said instead, "and whether Rosie brushed her teeth, and if there's enough flour for tomorrow's bread." "All very important concerns for a wedding night," Elias said dryly, and Clara heard the hint of humor in his voice. He moved closer, taking the dish towel from her hands. "Leave this. Come sit with me." He led her to the parlor, where a fire crackled in the hearth. They sat together on the settee, not touching, but close enough that Clara could feel the heat radiating from him. Outside, coyotes called to each other, their voices rising and falling like water. "I want to be clear about expectations," Elias said after a long silence. "Your room is yours. I won't—" He cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable. "I won't impose myself. Not until you're ready. This marriage is real, but it doesn't have to be—" He gestured helplessly. "All at once." Clara felt a rush of gratitude so strong it almost brought tears. "Thank you. I just need time to adjust." "Take all you need." His hand found hers on the cushion between them, his thumb tracing her knuckles. "I rushed Sarah into things when we were young. I was impatient, foolish. I thought love meant claiming someone quickly before they could change their mind." His voice roughened. "But love isn't possession. It's patience. It's earning trust slowly, brick by brick." "You loved her very much," Clara said softly. It wasn't a question. "I did. I do. The memory of her, at least." Elias stared into the fire. "But memory isn't enough to keep you warm at night. Isn't enough to raise a daughter. Isn't enough to run a ranch. At some point, you have to choose to keep living instead of just surviving." "Is that what I am? Your choice to keep living?" He turned to her then, and the intensity in his eyes stole her breath. "You're my choice to try. To hope. To build something new instead of just mourning what was lost." His hand tightened on hers. "I know this isn't a love match. I know you came here for practical reasons. Security, a home, escape from whatever you left behind. That's honest, real. I can work with honest." The word honest pierced Clara like a blade. If only he knew how dishonest she truly was. "I'll do my best," she said, and at least that much was true. "To be a good wife, a good mother to Rosie, to deserve this chance." "You already do," Elias said simply. "These past few days, watching you with Rosie, seeing how hard you work, you've earned your place here. You belong." Belong. That dangerous, beautiful word. Clara leaned her head against his shoulder, letting herself have this one moment of peace before the weight of her deception crushed it. Elias's arm came around her, warm and protective, and she closed her eyes against the tears that threatened. She'd come here as the wrong bride. But sitting in this firelit room, wrapped in her husband's careful embrace, she let herself imagine, just for a moment, what it might feel like to be the right one, even if she'd never truly deserve it. The weeks that followed the wedding settled into a rhythm that felt almost like happiness, though Clara hardly dared name it that. October arrived with frost-tipped mornings and afternoons warm enough to work in shirt sleeves. The aspen trees turned gold against the evergreen hills, and Rosie collected the prettiest leaves, pressing them between the pages of books like captured sunshine. Clara threw herself into the work of the ranch with an intensity that sometimes worried even Mrs. Halloway. She rose before dawn to bake bread, spent her mornings tending the garden and chickens, her afternoons mending clothes or preserving food for the coming winter. She scrubbed floors until they gleamed, polished windows until they disappeared, organized the pantry with military precision. If she worked hard enough, maybe she could outrun the guilt that followed her like a shadow. "You're going to work yourself into the ground," Mrs. Halloway observed one afternoon as they rendered lard together, the kitchen thick with steam and the rich smell of pork fat. Even Sarah didn't push herself this hard, and she was born to ranch life. Clara's hands paused in their work. It was the first time Mrs. Halloway had mentioned Elias's first wife directly to her, and the comparison sat heavy in the air between them. "I just want everything to be perfect," Clara said quietly. I want to prove I belong here. Belonging isn't about perfection, girl. It's about being real. Mrs. Halloway fixed her with those knowing gray eyes. You keep yourself wound so tight, I'm surprised you don't snap. What are you so afraid of? Everything, Clara wanted to say. I'm afraid that if I stop moving, stop working, stop proving my worth every single day, someone will look too closely and see the fraud underneath. I'm afraid that belonging is something I'll never truly have because I stole my way into it. I'm just trying to be a good wife, she said instead. A good wife knows when to rest, knows when to let herself be human instead of a machine. Mrs. Halloway went back to stirring the lard. Elias doesn't need perfect. He needs present. There's a difference. The words haunted Clara throughout the day, particularly that evening when Elias came in from the fields covered in dust and exhaustion. She'd prepared his favorite meal, roast beef with potatoes and carrots, fresh bread, apple pie made from the last of the season's harvest. The table looked like something from a magazine, every detail arranged just so. Elias washed up and sat down, looking at the spread with something like bewilderment. Clara, this is too much. You don't have to. I wanted to, she interrupted, then caught herself. He'd started calling her Clara sometime in the second week of their marriage, abandoning the formal Eloise without explanation. She'd been too relieved to question it, though part of her wondered if he somehow knew, if he'd sensed the wrongness of that borrowed name. You work so hard. The least I can do is make sure you eat well. I work hard because it's my ranch, my responsibility. You work hard because... He paused, studying her face. Why do you work so hard, Clara? What are you trying to prove? The question caught her off guard, too close to what Mrs. Halloway had asked. She busied herself serving his plate, avoiding his eyes. I'm not trying to prove anything. I'm just doing my job. Your job is to be my wife, not my servant. His voice was gentle but firm. And part of being my wife means letting me take care of you too. Means resting when you're tired. Means you don't have to earn your place here with every meal and every scrubbed floor. Clara set down the serving spoon with a hand that trembled slightly. I don't know how to do that. I've spent my whole life earning my keep. I don't know how to just be, without justifying my existence with work. The confession slipped out before she could stop it, raw and true. Elias was quiet for a long moment, and when Clara finally dared to look at him, his eyes held something that looked like understanding mixed with sorrow. Someone taught you that, he said quietly. That you had to earn the right to take up space. Someone made you believe your worth was measured in what you could do rather than who you are. Clara's throat closed around the truth she couldn't speak. Victoria's voice echoed in her memory. You're useful, at least, if nothing else. Her stepmother had spent years making sure Clara understood she was tolerated, not loved, accepted, not wanted, a burden to be managed. It doesn't matter, Clara managed. That's just how I was raised. It matters to me. Elias reached across the table, his work-roughened hand covering hers. Because I don't want you living that way here. I don't want you thinking you have to justify your existence every day. You're my wife, Rosie's mother now. You belong here not because you work yourself to exhaustion, but because this is your home, because we want you here. The words were balm on wounds Clara hadn't realized were still bleeding. She turned her hand over beneath his, threading their fingers together. This touch had become familiar over the past weeks. Small gestures of affection, carefully given and carefully received. Nothing rushed, nothing demanded. Just the slow building of something that might eventually become real. I'll try, she whispered, to believe that. That's all I ask. Elias squeezed her hand once before releasing it and picking up his fork. Now let's eat this incredible meal you've prepared, and then you're going to sit in the parlor with Rosie and me and do absolutely nothing productive for at least an hour. Doctor's orders. You're not a doctor. Husband's orders, then, which are legally binding in the territory of Wyoming. His eyes held a hint of humor that made him look younger, less careworn. Or so I choose to believe. Clara found herself smiling, a real smile, not the practiced one she'd worn for so many years. I suppose I have to obey then, for legal reasons. Exactly, for legal reasons. They ate together as the sun set beyond the windows, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that seemed too beautiful to be real. Rosie chattered about her day, the new chick that had hatched, the fox she'd seen at the edge of the woods, the story Mrs. Halloway had told her about sailing ships and pirates. Clara listened with half her attention while the other half marveled at the simple domesticity of it all. A family meal, conversation and laughter. The kind of evening she'd dreamed about but never believed she'd have. Later, true to his word, Elias insisted she sit in the parlor while he and Rosie played checkers on the rug before the fire. Clara picked up some mending. She couldn't sit completely idle, but mostly she watched them together. Father and daughter, dark heads bent close, arguing good-naturedly about whether Rosie's move was legal or not. "Papa, you're just mad because I'm winning." "I'm not mad. I'm concerned about your understanding of the rules. There's a difference. Mrs. Halloway says when men start talking about rules, it means they're losing." Elias shot Clara a look of mock desperation. "Your mother is corrupting my daughter with her wisdom. This is a conspiracy." "Your mother." He'd started saying it casually over the past week, not making a big production of it, just sliding the words into conversation like they belonged there. Each time, Clara felt something crack and resettle in her chest, a painful kind of joy mixed with devastating guilt. "I plead innocent," Clara said, holding up her hands. "Though Mrs. Halloway isn't wrong about men and rules. Betrayed by my own wife. This is what marriage does, turns a man's household against him." But he was smiling as he said it, and when Rosie crowed in triumph over her victory, he scooped her up and spun her around until she shrieked with laughter. Then he deposited her on the settee next to Clara, where the child immediately snuggled close, her small, warm body fitting perfectly against Clara's side. "Tell me a story," Rosie demanded. "The one about the princess and the stars." Clara's mind went blank. She didn't know any stories about princesses and stars. Eloise probably knew dozens of fairy tales, had probably been read to sleep every night by a mother who loved her. But Clara's childhood had been different, work and silence and staying out of the way. "I don't think I know that one," she admitted quietly. Rosie's face fell slightly, then brightened. "Then make one up. You're good at making things. Make up a story." Clara looked helplessly at Elias, who just shrugged with an expression that said, "You're on your own." She took a breath, let her mind wander, and found herself speaking words she didn't know she'd been holding. "Once upon a time, there was a girl who wasn't a princess at all. She was just ordinary, the kind of person nobody really noticed. She worked hard and kept quiet and believed that was all she'd ever be. But one night, when the world was very dark and she was very alone, she looked up at the stars and made a wish. Not for riches or beauty or anything grand. She just wished to matter to someone, to be seen." Rosie was silent, listening with the intense focus children bring to stories that speak to something true inside them. Even Elias had stopped moving, his attention fixed on Clara with an expression she couldn't read. "And the stars heard her," Clara continued, her voice soft. "They couldn't make her a princess. That's not how real magic works. But they could give her something better. They could lead her to a place where she was needed, where her ordinary skills and her ordinary heart were exactly what someone was wishing for. So they arranged things, moved pieces around like chess pieces on a board, until she found herself somewhere new, somewhere that could become home if she was brave enough to let it." "Did she let it?" Rosie whispered. "Did she stay?" Clara looked down at the child pressed against her side, then up at Elias watching from across the room, and felt the weight of the moment settle over all of them. "She's still deciding," Clara said honestly. "Still learning to believe the stars knew what they were doing, still afraid that maybe she doesn't deserve the gift they gave her." "That's silly," Rosie declared. "If the stars sent her, then of course she deserves it. Stars don't make mistakes." From the mouths of babes, Clara thought. If only it were that simple. "Time for bed, little philosopher," Elias said, breaking the spell. "Go get your nightgown on. I'll be up to say prayers in a minute." Rosie kissed Clara's cheek, a habit she'd adopted without asking permission, and scampered upstairs. The moment she was gone, the room felt larger and smaller at once. Clara set aside her mending, suddenly unable to meet Elias's eyes. "That was some story," he said quietly, moving to sit where Rosie had been. The settee dipped under his weight, rolling Clara slightly toward him. "About the girl who wished to matter." It's just a fairy tale. Is it? His hand found hers again, that gesture that had become their language. Or were you telling me something true? Clara's heart hammered against her ribs. This was dangerous territory, getting too close to confession. But she was so tired of holding everything inside, of carrying the weight of her deception alone. I think everyone wants to matter, she said carefully. Everyone wants to be more than just useful. To be, I don't know, necessary, irreplaceable. You are, Elias said, his voice rough with something that might have been emotion. To Rosie, to this household, to... He paused, seeming to gather courage. To me. Clara's breath caught. They'd been dancing around this for weeks, this growing thing between them that was more than partnership but not quite love. Not yet. But maybe the beginning of it. The first tender shoots pushing through frozen ground. I'm not who you think I am, she whispered, the closest she could come to truth without breaking everything apart. I think you're someone who works too hard, cares too much, and doesn't believe she deserves good things. Elias's thumb traced circles on the back of her hand. I think you're someone running from a past that hurt you. I think you're stronger than you know and more worthy than you believe. He paused. And I think I'm starting to fall in love with you, which wasn't part of the plan but seems to be happening anyway. The words hit Clara like a physical blow. Love. He was falling in love with her, with Clara, whoever she was, not the Eloise he'd been promised. But how could she accept that love when it was built on lies? How could she let him care for someone who didn't really exist? Elias, She stopped, words tangling in her throat. Tell him, her conscience screamed. Tell him now before this goes any further, before the love takes root and grows into something that will devastate him when he learns the truth. But before she could force out the confession, footsteps thundered down the stairs, and Rosie appeared in her nightgown, eyes wide with distress. Papa! Mama! Come quick! There's something wrong with Queen Victoria! They rushed to the chicken coop, Clara grabbing a lantern on the way. Inside, the fat hen that Rosie had named after royalty lay on her side, breathing shallowly, her eyes glazed. The other chickens huddled in the corner, making distressed sounds. Is she dying? Rosie's voice trembled on the edge of tears. Please don't let her die. Clara knelt beside the bird, running gentle hands over her body. She'd helped her father with sick animals before Victoria had forbidden it, and the old knowledge came back like muscle memory. The hen's crop was swollen, distended, likely impacted. She's not dying, Clara said with more confidence than she felt. But she needs help. Her crop is blocked. We need to massage it, try to break up whatever's stuck. You know how to do that? Elias asked, surprised. Clara realized her mistake too late. Eloise wouldn't know how to treat a sick chicken. Eloise barely knew how to collect eggs, whatever's stuck. You know how to do that? Elias asked, surprised. Clara realized her mistake too late. Eloise wouldn't know how to treat a sick chicken. Eloise barely knew how to collect eggs. But Clara did, and in this moment, with Rosie's tearful eyes watching, she couldn't pretend ignorance. My father taught me, she said, which was true even if it didn't fit the story Victoria had crafted. Before things changed. We had animals. I learned how to care for them. She worked carefully, massaging the hen's crop with steady pressure, feeling the mass inside begin to break apart. Elias held the lantern while Rosie stroked the bird's feathers, whispering encouragement. It took 20 minutes of patient work, but finally Queen Victoria gave a great heave and expelled a wad of grass and grain. Her eyes cleared, and she made an indignant sound as if offended by the whole ordeal. She's okay. Rosie threw her arms around Clara's neck. You saved her. You're magic, just like in the story. Not magic, Clara said, hugging the child back. Just someone who pays attention. Later, after Rosie had been tucked into bed with assurances that Queen Victoria would fully recover, Clara found herself alone in the kitchen again, washing chicken mess from her hands. She'd removed her good dress and put on an old work dress, but she still felt disheveled, undone. The near confession earlier had left her shaken, and the incident with the chicken had only complicated things further. Every day she revealed more of herself, the real Clara, not the fake Eloise, and every day she dug herself deeper into deception. Thank you, Elias said from the doorway, For saving Rosie's chicken. She would have been devastated if Queen Victoria had died. I'm just glad I knew what to do. You know a lot of things. He moved into the room, leaning against the counter. Things that surprise me. Good surprises, but surprises nonetheless. Clara kept her eyes on her hands, scrubbing harder than necessary. People are complicated. We contain multitudes, remember? Your letters didn't mention knowing about animal husbandry, or that your father taught you to tend livestock. There it was. The gentle probing, the pieces not fitting together the way they should. Clara's heart began to race. It didn't seem relevant, she said carefully. You wanted a wife who could keep house and care for Rosie. The other skills, they were just things I learned along the way. Clara! He said her name, the name he'd chosen to call her despite her arriving as Eloise, with something like tenderness mixed with concern. I'm not interrogating you. I'm trying to understand you, because the woman I'm getting to know doesn't quite match the woman described in those letters, and I'm finding I prefer the real version. The words should have brought relief, but instead they brought terror. If he preferred the real Clara to the fictional Eloise, what would he think when he learned the entire foundation was a lie? That she'd come here under false pretenses, stolen her own sister's place, deceived him from the very first moment? What if the real version isn't better? Clara heard herself ask. What if she's just broken in different ways? What if she doesn't deserve the life you're offering? Elias crossed the space between them in 2 strides, taking her wet hands in his despite the soap and water. Then she'd still be the woman I married, the woman who makes my daughter laugh, who saves chickens in the middle of the night, who works herself to exhaustion trying to earn something that's already hers. His eyes searched her face. What are you so afraid of, Clara? What do you think I'll see if you stop hiding? Everything, she wanted to scream. You'll see the lie. You'll see the fraud. You'll see that I'm not the woman you chose, just the desperate imposter who took her place. But what came out was smaller, more broken. I'm afraid you'll regret choosing me. That you'll wish you'd waited for someone better. Someone who wasn't so... She gestured helplessly at herself. Damaged. Everyone's damaged, Elias said softly. I'm damaged. Lost a wife I loved. Spent 2 years barely holding myself together for Rosie's sake. Still have days where I wake up and forget Sarah's gone, reach for her side of the bed, and find it cold. His hands tightened on hers. But that's what makes us human. The cracks and breaks, and badly healed wounds. I'm not asking you to be perfect, Clara. I'm asking you to be real with me. The request was so simple and so impossible. How could she be real when real meant confessing to a deception that would destroy everything she'd built? How could she risk losing this? The first place she'd ever belonged, the first people who'd ever wanted her, for the luxury of honesty. I'm trying, she whispered, and it was the most honest thing she could offer. I'm trying to be worth the chance you gave me. You already are. Elias lifted one of her hands to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles that felt like a promise. Now come to bed. Not my bed. Not yet. I meant what I said about patience. But you need to sleep. The ranch will still be here tomorrow, and it'll need you rested, not exhausted. Clara let him lead her upstairs, let him kiss her forehead at her bedroom door with a tenderness that made her want to weep. Then she lay in her bed, soft and warm, and so much better than anything she'd known before, and stared at the ceiling while guilt ate at her like acid. She loved them. That was the terrible truth crystallizing in her chest. She loved Rosie with a fierceness that surprised her, loved the way the child reached for her hand, trusted her completely, called her mama without hesitation. And she was falling in love with Elias, with his quiet strength, his patient kindness, his way of seeing past her defenses to something worth caring about. But they loved a fiction. They loved the woman who'd saved them, not knowing she was also the woman deceiving them every single day. The next morning brought the first real snow, soft flakes drifting down like stars falling to earth. Rosie pressed her nose to the window, enchanted, while Clara made breakfast and tried to shake off the sleepless night. Can we build a snowman? Rosie asked. Please? I'll do all my chores first, I promise. If there's enough snow by afternoon, Clara agreed. But your father's right, chores first. The day passed in the usual rhythm of work, but everything felt different under the blanket of new snow. The world looked clean, fresh, like anything might be possible. Clara found herself laughing as Rosie chased chickens through the snow, the birds indignant at the cold white stuff invading their domain. They were in the kitchen making lunch when hoofbeats approached, fast and urgent. Clara looked up to see a stranger dismounting in the yard, his horse lathered despite the cold. Elias emerged from the barn, and the two men spoke briefly before Elias's body went rigid. Something was wrong. Clara wiped her hands and moved to the door, her heart beginning to pound. Through the window, she could see Elias's face, pale, shocked, the expression of a man receiving news he couldn't process. Then he was striding toward the house, the stranger behind him, and Clara barely had time to step back before the door burst open. "Clara." Elias's voice was strange, tight. "We have visitors coming from Colorado Springs. They'll be here by evening." The world tilted sickeningly. Colorado Springs, Victoria. The past Clara thought she'd outrun, crashing back into the present like a wave breaking over a sandcastle. "Who?" she managed through numb lips. "Your family." Elias studied her face, seeing the terror she couldn't hide. "Your stepmother and your sister. They're coming to—" He paused, reading from a telegram the stranger had delivered. "To discuss matters of family importance. They'll be staying at the hotel in town, but they want to see you immediately upon arrival." Clara's knees went weak. She gripped the back of a chair to stay upright, her mind racing through possibilities and finding no good ones. Victoria wouldn't travel all this way for a social call. She was coming to expose Clara, to reveal the deception, to destroy everything Clara had built on foundations of lies. "Clara?" Elias's hand was on her arm, steadying her. "What is this about? You look like you've seen a ghost." She couldn't form words, couldn't breathe. The walls were closing in, the careful life she'd constructed collapsing like a house made of cards. "Mama?" Rosie appeared in the doorway, sensing the tension. "What's wrong?" What's wrong was that the reckoning Clara had been dreading was finally here. What's wrong was that by evening, Elias would know the truth. That his wife wasn't Eloise Whitmore, wasn't the woman he'd chosen, wasn't anything but a desperate imposter who'd lied her way into his home and his heart. What's wrong was that Clara was about to lose everything that mattered, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. Clara's hands were shaking so badly she had to grip the chair harder to keep from collapsing. The telegram seemed to burn in Elias's hand like a brand, each word a nail in the coffin of the life she'd tried to build. Victoria was coming. By evening. There would be no more running, no more hiding behind borrowed names and careful lies. "Everything's fine, sweetheart," Clara managed to tell Rosie, her voice sounding strange even to her own ears. "Why don't you go check on Queen Victoria? Make sure she's drinking plenty of water." Rosie looked between them with the sharp instinct children have for adult distress, but she obeyed, pulling on her coat and heading toward the chicken coop. The moment the door closed behind her, Clara felt her carefully constructed composure begin to crumble. "Talk to me." Elias's voice was steady, but edged with concern. "What's happening? Why do you look like the world just ended?" "Because it did," Clara wanted to say. "Because in a few hours, you're going to learn that everything you thought you knew about me is a lie. Because I'm about to lose the only home I've ever had, the only people who've ever wanted me. My stepmother and I, we don't have an easy relationship," Clara said carefully, each word chosen like stepping stones across a rushing river. "She's not a kind woman, never has been." "Then why is she coming here?" "I don't know." It was the truth, even if it wasn't the whole truth. Clara couldn't imagine what had prompted Victoria to make the long journey to Wyoming. Unless Eloise had recovered fully and Victoria had decided it was time to rectify the substitution. Unless Clara's usefulness had expired and Victoria wanted to collect what remained of the mail-order bride payment. Unless cruelty had simply brought her here because that's what Victoria did, she found happiness and crushed it. Elias studied her face with an intensity that made Clara want to look away. "There's something you're not telling me, something that's terrifying you." "There are a lot of things I haven't told you," Clara whispered. "Things I should have said from the beginning, but couldn't. Things that might change how you see me." She watched emotions flicker across his face, confusion, concern, and something that might have been fear. His hand reached out, then dropped back to his side like he wasn't sure he had the right to touch her anymore. "Whatever it is, he said slowly. Whatever's between you and your stepmother, we'll face it together. You're my wife. My family now. That means something. The words were meant to comfort, but they only drove the knife of guilt deeper. She was his wife under false pretenses. His family under a stolen name. Nothing about their marriage was built on the solid ground he believed it was. Elias, I need to tell you, Clara started, but the sound of hoofbeats interrupted her again. This time it was Sheriff Mitchell, dismounting quickly and striding toward the house with purpose. He knocked once before entering, his face grim. Elias, Clara, got word from the telegraph office. Your visitors arrived early. They're at the hotel now. The stepmother is asking that Clara come into town immediately. Says it's urgent family business that can't wait. He paused, reading Clara's expression. Is everything all right here? Fine, Clara lied, her voice hollow. Everything's fine. The hell it is, Elias said quietly. Tom, what do you know about these people? Did they say anything about why they're here? The sheriff shifted uncomfortably. The older woman, Mrs. Whitmore, she's staying at the hotel with a younger girl. Pretty little thing, looks delicate. They caused quite a stir arriving in their fancy Eastern clothes. He glanced at Clara. The older woman made some comments about needing to set things right and correct a misunderstanding. Judge Morrison heard it and asked me to ride out here, make sure everyone knew they'd arrived. Set things right, correct a misunderstanding. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. I need to go, Clara said abruptly. I need to go now, before they come here. Before Rosie. She couldn't finish the sentence. Before Rosie hears that her new mother is a fraud. Before this child who'd already lost so much loses again. You're not going alone, Elias said firmly. Whatever this is, we face it together. Tom, can you stay with Rosie? Tell her we had business in town? Of course. The sheriff's eyes were kind but worried. Clara, if you're in any kind of trouble, I'm not in trouble, Clara interrupted. I am the trouble. The ride into town was silent except for the creak of the wagon and the soft sound of snow falling. Clara sat rigid beside Elias, her hands clenched in her lap, trying to prepare for what was coming. But how did you prepare for the destruction of everything you'd built? How did you find words to explain the inexplicable? Whatever happens, Elias said as they approached the town, whatever your stepmother says, I need you to tell me the truth. Not her version. Yours. Can you do that? Clara nodded, though she wasn't sure she could. The truth had been locked inside her for so long, wrapped in so many layers of self-preservation and fear, she wasn't sure she knew how to set it free anymore. The hotel was the nicest building in Willow Ridge, though by Colorado Springs standards it was modest at best. 2 stories of weathered wood with a wraparound porch and windows that rattled in the wind. Clara had never been inside, had never had reason to. Now she climbed the steps feeling like she was mounting a gallows. Victoria was waiting in the lobby, dressed in deep purple silk that made everyone else look shabby by comparison. Her hair was perfectly arranged, her posture impeccable, every inch the proper Eastern lady. Next to her, pale and beautiful in a cream-colored dress, sat Eloise. Clara's half-sister looked fully recovered from her illness, the typhoid having left no visible mark on her delicate features. She looked exactly like what Elias had been promised, a china doll of a bride, pretty and refined and nothing at all like the work-worn woman standing in the doorway. Victoria's cold blue eyes locked onto Clara, and her smile was sharp as broken glass. Eloise, darling, how lovely to see you looking so well. Ranch life clearly agrees with you. The use of the false name in front of Elias was deliberate, calculated. Clara felt his body go rigid beside her, felt the exact moment confusion began to shift toward understanding. Mother, Clara managed, though the word tasted like poison. This is unexpected. Is it? Surely you didn't think we'd simply abandon you out here in the wilderness without checking to ensure you'd settled properly. Victoria's gaze shifted to Elias, and her smile turned saccharine. You must be Mr. Grant. How wonderful to finally meet the man who married our dear Eloise. Elias looked between Clara and the woman beside Victoria, his face carefully neutral in the way of men processing information that doesn't make sense. I'm sorry, but I'm confused. That's... He gestured to the delicate blonde. Who is that? That, Victoria said with exquisite cruelty, is Eloise Whitmore, my daughter, the woman you were corresponding with, the woman you were expecting as your bride. The silence that followed was so complete, Clara could hear her own heartbeat, could hear snow hitting the windows, could hear the death of everything she'd dared to hope for. I don't understand, Elias said slowly, but Clara could see in his eyes that he was beginning to, pieces clicking into place, the puzzle solving itself in the worst possible way. Don't you? Victoria's voice dripped false sympathy. How unfortunate. I had hoped Clara would have explained by now, that she would have had the decency to confess before we were forced to travel all this way to correct her deception. Deception. Elias repeated the word like it was foreign, like he was testing its weight. Then his eyes, those blue eyes that had looked at Clara with growing warmth, growing love, turned to her with an expression that made her wish the floor would open up and swallow her whole. Clara, what is she talking about? Clara's mouth opened, but no sound came out. All the words she'd rehearsed, all the explanations and justifications and desperate pleas, they evaporated like morning mist. She stood there, exposed and helpless, while the man she'd come to love looked at her like she was a stranger. Perhaps I should explain, Victoria said smoothly, settling into a chair like she was holding court, since Clara seems to have lost her tongue. You see, Mr. Grant, when you wrote to propose marriage to Eloise, we accepted. Arrangements were made, tickets were purchased. But then Eloise fell ill with typhoid. Nothing serious, thank goodness, but enough to make travel impossible. So you sent Clara instead, Elias finished, his voice flat, without telling me, without giving me a choice. We sent Clara to fulfill the arrangement temporarily, yes. She was supposed to explain the situation immediately, to make clear that she was simply holding Eloise's place until Eloise could join you. Victoria's smile turned razor sharp. But it seems Clara had other ideas. It seems she decided to claim her sister's life as her own, to steal a marriage that was never meant for her. That's not... Clara finally found her voice, though it came out broken. It's not that simple. She told me to go as Eloise. She said to use her name to become her. I didn't want to lie, but I had no choice. I had nowhere else. Oh, Clara, Victoria interrupted with mock sadness. Always the victim, always making excuses. The truth is, you saw an opportunity and you took it. You've been living as Eloise for weeks now, enjoying a life that belongs to your sister, playing house with a man who never would have chosen you if he'd known the truth. Each word was a blade finding its mark. Clara felt herself bleeding out emotionally, felt everything she'd built crumbling to dust. And the worst part, the absolute worst part, was that Victoria wasn't entirely wrong. Clara had taken what wasn't hers, had claimed a life she had no right to, had deceived a good man who'd offered her nothing but kindness. Elias, Clara turned to him, desperate. Please let me explain. It started as deception, yes, but everything since, everything we've built, that's real. My feelings for you, my love for Rosie, the way I've tried to be a good wife, none of that is fake. How would I know? Elias's voice was quiet, controlled, which was somehow worse than if he'd shouted. How would I know what's real when the foundation is a lie? When the name you came here under isn't even yours? When every day you woke up next to me and chose to keep lying? I wanted to tell you, so many times I almost, but you didn't. He took a step back, putting physical distance between them that felt like a chasm. You let me fall in love with someone who doesn't exist. You let Rosie call you mama, let her trust you, love you, and all the while you were living a lie. The woman you fell in love with does exist, Clara said desperately. She's me. I'm Clara. Yes, not Eloise, but everything else, the way I cook, the way I care for Rosie, the way I feel about you, that's all real. That's all me. Is it? Elias's eyes were cold now, shuttered. Or is it just another role you're playing? Another name you borrowed until something better came along? The accusation hit like a physical blow. Clara felt tears burning behind her eyes but refused to let them fall. She wouldn't cry, wouldn't play the victim the way Victoria claimed she always did. I understand you're angry, she said, fighting to keep her voice steady. You have every right to be. But before you cast me out, before you decide I'm nothing but a liar and a fraud, ask yourself this. Have I been a good wife to you? Have I cared for your home, your daughter, your life with anything less than my whole heart? Does the name I came here under really matter more than the person I've proven myself to be? It matters when that name is the only reason you're here. Elias's jaw was tight, the muscle jumping like he was grinding his teeth. It matters when I specifically chose Eloise based on her letters, her background, her... He stopped, seeming to realize something. The letters, the ones about poetry and piano and genteel upbringing, those were real, weren't they? Written by actual Eloise, not by you. I wrote those letters, Victoria interjected helpfully, clearly enjoying the destruction she was orchestrating. Eloise can barely spell her own name, bless her. She's beautiful but not terribly bright. I crafted her into what you wanted, a woman of refinement and culture. Instead, you got Clara, a workhorse good for nothing but labor. Stop it, Clara said sharply, turning on her stepmother with fury she'd been suppressing for years. You don't get to reduce me to that. You don't get to define my worth anymore. I'm not defining anything, dear. I'm simply stating facts. You were never meant to be a bride. You were meant to be a servant. That's why I kept you around after your father died. You were useful, but you were never supposed to reach above your station, never supposed to claim something that wasn't yours. She claimed a life I was supposed to have. Eloise spoke for the first time, her voice soft and sweet as honey. She took my place, my husband, my home, and she didn't even have the decency to tell the truth. Clara stared at her half-sister, seeing the calculated innocence in those wide blue eyes. Eloise had always been good at playing the victim, at making herself seem helpless while Victoria did her dirty work. They were a match set, beauty and cruelty, helplessness and manipulation. You never wanted to come here, Clara said flatly. You were terrified of ranch life. You wanted to stay in Colorado Springs and find some city gentleman who'd let you sit in parlors and look pretty. This marriage was a burden you were relieved to escape. That may be true, Victoria said smoothly, but it was still Eloise's choice to make. You stole that choice from her, and from Mr. Grant. Elias had been silent through this exchange, his face carved from stone. When he finally spoke, his voice was careful, controlled, the voice of a man holding onto his temper by a thread. Mrs. Whitmore, Eloise, I appreciate you traveling all this way to inform me of this situation, but I need to speak with my wife alone. Whatever happens next, it's between Clara and me. Your wife, Victoria repeated with amusement. Is she really? I wonder what the law would say about a marriage contracted under false pretenses. You married Eloise Whitmore, Mr. Grant. The woman standing before you is Clara Whitmore, no relation to the name on your marriage certificate. One might argue you're not married at all. The words hit Clara like ice water. She hadn't thought that far ahead, hadn't considered the legal implications. Was their marriage even valid? Could Elias simply declare it null and void, send her away like she'd never existed? That's a question for lawyers and judges, Elias said coldly. Not for you. I'll thank you to return to your hotel and let me handle this privately. Victoria stood with exaggerated grace, gathering her skirts. Of course. We're staying through tomorrow, should you need clarification on anything. And Mr. Grant, if you decide this marriage is invalid, Eloise is still available. She's recovered fully from her illness and ready to fulfill the original arrangement. You could still have the bride you actually wanted. She swept out with Eloise trailing behind like a pale shadow, leaving Clara and Elias alone in the hotel lobby. Clara could feel eyes on them, the desk clerk, a few townspeople who'd gathered to witness the drama. Small towns had no secrets, and by evening, everyone in Willow Ridge would know that Elias Grant's bride was an imposter. We should go somewhere private, Clara said quietly, to talk. There's nothing to talk about. Elias's voice was empty, hollow. You lied to me. For weeks you looked me in the eye and lied. Let me believe... He stopped, jaw working. Let me start caring about someone who doesn't exist. I do exist, Clara said desperately. Elias, please. I know you're angry. I know you feel betrayed. But the woman you've been living with, she's real. I'm real. The only thing that's false is the name I arrived under. The name matters. His eyes finally met hers, and Clara saw something in them that was worse than anger, disappointment, deep, crushing disappointment. I asked you for honesty. I told you that's what I valued most, and you gave me elaborate deception instead. How am I supposed to trust anything about you now?" "I don't know," Clara admitted, tears finally escaping despite her best efforts. "I don't know how to earn back trust I never deserved in the first place. But I'm asking you to give me the chance to try. I'm asking you not to throw away what we've built just because it started with a lie. What we've built is founded on sand, Clara. And sand can't hold anything real." He turned away from her, staring out the window at the snow-covered street. "I need time. I need to think about what this means, what I want to do. For now—" He paused, and Clara heard the pain beneath the anger. "For now, you can stay at the house. For Rosie's sake. But we're done, Clara. Whatever we were building, whatever I thought we were becoming, it's over." The finality in his voice broke something in Clara that she wasn't sure could be repaired. She wanted to argue, to beg, to throw herself at his feet and plead for another chance. But pride, the small shred of dignity she had left, kept her spine straight. "I understand," she said quietly. "And for what it's worth, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I lied. I'm sorry I wasn't brave enough to tell you the truth. I'm sorry I let myself believe I could have this life without paying the price for how I got it." Elias said nothing, just stood there with his back to her, rigid as a statue. Clara waited for a moment, hoping he'd turn around, hoping he'd say something that would give her a thread of hope to cling to. But he remained silent, and finally, Clara turned and walked out into the snow. The ride back to the ranch was torture. Clara sat as far from Elias as possible in the wagon, her hands clutched in her lap, her mind spinning through everything that had happened. Victoria's cruel reveal, Eloise's angelic manipulation, the look in Elias's eyes as he realized his wife was a stranger. When they arrived home, Sheriff Mitchell emerged from the house with Rosie by his side. The little girl took one look at Clara's tear-streaked face and Elias's rigid posture, and her smile faltered. "What's wrong? What happened?" Clara opened her mouth but found she couldn't speak. How did you tell a child that her new mother was leaving, that the family she'd prayed for was built on lies? "Nothing for you to worry about, sweetheart," Elias said, his voice gentler than it had been with Clara. "Your mother and I just need to work through some grown-up things. Sheriff Mitchell, thank you for staying." "Of course." The sheriff's eyes moved between them, reading the situation with the skill of someone who'd seen plenty of domestic discord. "If there's anything else you need—" "We're fine," Elias said firmly. "Thank you." After the sheriff left, the three of them stood in the yard, a family that was already fracturing. Rosie looked between them with growing distress, her small face crumpling. "Did I do something wrong? Is Mama leaving?" The word Mama hit Clara like a bullet. She dropped to her knees in the snow, pulling Rosie close. "No, baby, you didn't do anything wrong. You're perfect. This is about grown-up mistakes. Not yours. Never yours." "But you're crying." Rosie's small hands touched Clara's face. "I don't want you to cry. I don't want you to leave like my first mama did." Clara's heart shattered completely. She held this child she'd come to love as her own, breathing in the scent of her hair, memorizing the feel of her small body pressed trustingly against hers. How many times had she held Rosie like this? How many bedtime stories, how many scraped knees kissed better, how many promises that everything would be okay? And now she was going to break the most important promise of all, that she would stay. "Whatever happens," Clara said fiercely, "you need to know this. I love you. I love you so much, and nothing that happens is because of you. You're the best thing that's ever happened to me." "Then why are you talking like you're saying goodbye?" Rosie pulled back, her dark eyes swimming with tears. "I don't want you to go. Papa, tell her she can't go." Elias's face was a mask of pain. "Rosie, go inside. Start your evening chores. I need to talk to Clara." The use of her real name in front of Rosie didn't go unnoticed. The child looked confused, but she obeyed, casting worried glances back at them as she trudged toward the house. Once she was inside, Elias finally looked at Clara directly. "You can't tell her about the lie. She doesn't need to know that her mother is—" He stopped, unable to finish. "A fraud?" Clara supplied bitterly. "An imposter? What exactly do you want me to tell her, Elias? That I'm leaving because I'm tired of ranch life? That I don't love her? Because I won't. I won't make her think any of this is her fault. I don't know what I want you to tell her, Elias said, his voice rough with emotion. I don't know anything anymore. All I know is that my daughter has already lost one mother, and now she's about to lose another because— He stopped, jaw tight. Because I chose wrong. Because I trusted the wrong person. You didn't choose wrong, Clara said desperately. You chose someone who loves your daughter, who cares for your home, who tried every day to be worthy of you. The name might have been wrong, but the person was right. I know you can't see that now, but it's true. Is it? Or is that just another story you're telling yourself? Elias shook his head. I need time, Clara, time to think, time to figure out what's real and what's fiction, time to— His voice cracked. Time to stop feeling like everything I believed in was a lie. Clara nodded, even though her heart was breaking. How much time? I don't know, days, weeks, maybe— He paused, and the pain in his voice was palpable. Maybe forever. I don't know if I can get past this. I don't know if I can look at you without seeing the deception, without wondering what else you lied about. I never lied about loving you, Clara whispered, or loving Rosie. That was always real. How would I know? Elias turned away, his shoulders slumped with exhaustion. How would I ever know what's real about you again? He walked toward the barn, leaving Clara standing alone in the snow. She watched him go, watched the man she'd come to love put distance between them, and felt the last of her hope crumble into dust. That night, Clara moved through the routine of dinner like a ghost. She cooked Rosie's favorite meal, set the table with extra care, tried to make everything seem normal even though nothing would ever be normal again. Rosie chattered nervously, filling the silence with stories about Queen Victoria and the other chickens, clearly sensing the tension but not understanding it. Elias ate in silence, his eyes never meeting Clara's. After dinner, he disappeared to the barn, claiming work that needed doing. Clara cleaned up, then helped Rosie get ready for bed, savoring every moment. The warm bath, the careful brushing of hair, the selection of a nightgown. Will you tell me a story? Rosie asked, climbing into bed. About the girl and the stars? Clara's throat closed. She couldn't tell that story again, couldn't speak about wishes coming true when hers was crumbling apart. Not tonight, sweetheart. I'm very tired, but I'll sit with you until you fall asleep. She held Rosie's hand in the dark, listening to the child's breathing slow and deepen. Even in sleep, Rosie held tight to Clara's fingers, as if afraid she'd disappear. And she would disappear. Maybe not tonight, maybe not tomorrow, but soon. Elias would decide he couldn't forgive her, couldn't trust her, couldn't keep living with the woman who'd deceived him. He'd send her away, and she'd have to leave behind this child she'd come to love as her own. Clara stayed there until her arm went numb and her back ached, unwilling to break the contact. Finally, she gently extracted her hand and stood, pressing a kiss to Rosie's forehead. I'm so sorry, she whispered. I'm sorry I wasn't who you needed. I'm sorry I'm going to hurt you. I'm sorry I couldn't be enough. She slipped out of the room and down the hall to her own bedroom. The room that had been hers for such a brief, shining moment. Everything in it spoke of the life she'd tried to build, the curtains she'd sewn, the quilt Mrs. Halloway had given her as a wedding gift. The small carved bird Elias had left on her dresser one morning without explanation, a gift, a gesture, a sign that maybe he was starting to care. Clara picked up the bird now, running her fingers over the smooth wood. He'd made this, had taken time from his endless work to carve something beautiful for her, had thought about her while his hands shaped the wood, had cared enough to want to give her something, and she'd repaid his caring with lies. She set the bird down carefully and moved to the window, looking out at the snow-covered ranch. Somewhere out there, in the barn or the bunkhouse, or wandering the cold night, was the man whose life she'd disrupted, whose heart she'd broken even as she'd fallen in love with him. The sound of the front door opening and closing reached her, Elias coming back inside, his heavy footsteps on the stairs, the creak of his bedroom door, and then, faintly, the sound that broke her completely, a single, muffled sob. Elias was crying. This strong, stoic man who'd buried his first wife, raised his daughter alone, built a life from nothing. He was crying because of what Clara had done to him. She sank to the floor beside her bed, buried her face in her hands, and finally let herself fall apart. Clara woke before dawn with gritty eyes and a heart that felt like lead in her chest. She'd slept fitfully, waking every hour to the sound of her own racing thoughts and the memory of Elias's muffled sob through the wall. Now, in the pre-dawn darkness, she dressed quietly and made her way downstairs, moving on autopilot toward the one thing that had always made sense to her: work. The kitchen was cold, the stove unlit. Clara built the fire with shaking hands, then set about making coffee and biscuits, her body going through familiar motions while her mind spun in circles. What was she supposed to do now? Pack her things and leave before Elias formally asked her to go? Stay and fight for a marriage built on lies? Pretend everything was normal for Rosie's sake while the foundation crumbled beneath them all? She was pulling biscuits from the oven when footsteps on the stairs made her freeze. But it wasn't Elias. It was Rosie, small and rumpled in her nightgown, her dark hair tangled from sleep. "Mama, I had a bad dream." The word "mama" pierced Clara's heart. How many more times would she hear it before it was taken away forever? "Come here, baby." Clara opened her arms, and Rosie ran into them, burrowing against her chest. Clara held her tight, breathing in the scent of her hair, memorizing the weight of this child in her arms. "Tell me about the dream." "You went away," Rosie whispered. "You got on a stagecoach and left, and I tried to run after you, but my legs wouldn't work. And you looked at me through the window, but you didn't stop. You just kept going." Clara's eyes burned with tears she refused to shed. Children knew things, sensed things adults tried to hide. Rosie had felt the fracture in their family, even if she didn't understand what caused it. "It was just a dream," Clara said, though the words felt like ash in her mouth. "Dreams aren't real, but sometimes they come true." Rosie pulled back to look at Clara's face, her dark eyes too knowing for a 6-year-old. "Are you going to leave?" Clara opened her mouth to lie, to reassure, to protect this child from the truth as long as possible. But the words wouldn't come. She'd told enough lies. She couldn't add another one, not to Rosie. "I don't want to," she said carefully. "I want to stay here with you and your papa more than anything. But sometimes grown-ups have problems that are hard to fix. Sometimes we hurt each other without meaning to, and then we have to figure out if we can heal from it." "Did you hurt Papa?" Rosie's voice was small. "Is that why he's sad?" "Yes," Clara whispered. "I made a mistake. A big one. And now your Papa is hurt and angry. And I don't know if he can forgive me." "But you have to ask him to forgive you. You have to say you're sorry and promise to do better. That's what you taught me." Rosie's hands cupped Clara's face with the simple wisdom of childhood. "You said that's what families do. They forgive each other because love is bigger than mistakes." Clara's heart cracked clean through. She had said that just last week when Rosie had accidentally broken a dish and been terrified of punishment. Clara had held her and explained that families forgive, that love means giving people chances to do better. But did that apply when the mistake was calculated deception, when the wrong done was fundamental to everything that came after? "Some mistakes are harder to forgive than others," Clara said gently. "And sometimes, even when we're very sorry, the person we hurt needs time to decide if they can trust us again." "Then we'll give Papa time," Rosie decided with the confidence of a child who still believed problems could be solved through sheer force of will. "And while we wait, we'll show him how much we love him. We'll be extra good and extra helpful, and he'll remember that we're a family." If only it were that simple. But Clara nodded, holding Rosie close, and tried to believe that maybe innocence and love could accomplish what lies and fear had destroyed. The sound of Elias's bedroom door opening sent a jolt through Clara. She set Rosie down quickly, smoothing the child's hair. "Go get dressed, sweetheart. Quickly now." Rosie scampered upstairs, passing her father on the way with a cheerful "Morning, Papa," that sounded forced even to Clara's ears. Then Elias was in the kitchen, and the air grew thick with all the words neither of them knew how to say. He looked terrible. His eyes were red-rimmed, his hair uncombed, his shirt buttoned wrong. Clara had never seen him anything but perfectly put together, and the visible evidence of his suffering made her want to weep. "Coffee's ready," she said quietly. "And biscuits. I'll make eggs if you want them." "I'm not hungry." His voice was hoarse, like he'd been crying. or screaming, or both. He poured coffee with hands that shook slightly, then stood by the window, staring out at the lightening sky. Clara busied herself at the stove, giving him space, waiting for him to speak. The silence stretched between them like a living thing, fragile and dangerous. "I didn't sleep," Elias finally said. "Kept thinking about everything. About how many times you must have wanted to tell me the truth, but chose not to. About how every morning I woke up thinking I knew my wife. I was lying to myself." He turned to look at her, his eyes hollow. "Do you have any idea what that feels like? To realize everything you believed was fiction?" "No," Claire admitted, "but I know what it feels like to believe you're not worth the truth. To think that the only way anyone would want you is if you pretended to be someone else." She set down the spatula, facing him fully. "I'm not making excuses. What I did was wrong, but I need you to understand, I didn't do it to hurt you. I did it because Victoria convinced me I had no other choice, that I was worthless as myself, but might have value as Eloise." "So you believed her?" It wasn't a question. "You believed you weren't enough, so you became someone else?" "Yes." The admission felt like ripping out her own heart. "And then I got here, and you and Rosie were so kind, so welcoming. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I mattered, like I belonged somewhere. I was terrified that if you knew the truth, you'd send me away, that I'd lose the only home I'd ever had. So instead, you let me fall in love with a lie." Elias's voice cracked on the last word. "You let me think I was building something real with you. Let me trust you. Let Rosie love you. And all the while you were just, what, playing a part? Waiting to see if you could get away with it? No." Clara moved toward him instinctively, then stopped when he stepped back. The rejection stung like a slap. "I wasn't playing a part. Everything I did, everything I felt, that was real. The only lie was the name I came here under. Everything else was me. The real me. How am I supposed to believe that?" Elias set down his coffee cup hard enough that it cracked. Neither of them moved to clean up the spill spreading across the counter. "How am I supposed to trust anything you say when you've proven you're capable of sustaining a lie for weeks? Months?" "You're not," Clara said simply. The truth of it settled over her like a shroud. "You're not supposed to believe me. You're not supposed to trust me. I broke that trust, and I don't know how to earn it back. Maybe I never can." Something in Elias's expression shifted. Surprise, maybe, that she wasn't arguing or making excuses. He studied her face like he was seeing her for the first time, trying to reconcile the woman he'd known with the stranger standing before him. "Victoria said you were supposed to tell me immediately," he said after a long pause, "that you were just holding Eloise's place until she recovered. Was that true?" Clara hesitated, then decided there was no point in anything but complete honesty now. "That's what she told me. But I don't think she ever intended for Eloise to come here. I think she wanted to get rid of me, and this was a convenient way to do it. Send me west under a false name. Let me be your problem instead of hers. And you went along with it." "I went along with it because the alternative was being thrown out with nothing, no money, no references, no family who wanted me." Claire's voice hardened. "You asked what it feels like to believe everything you knew was fiction. Well, I felt that my entire life. My father loved me, but he died. My stepmother tolerated me because I was useful. My half-sister got everything I didn't: beauty, love, a future. I was invisible, disposable. So yes, when Victoria offered me a chance to be someone else, someone who might actually be wanted, I took it. Even though it meant deceiving me. Even though it meant deceiving you," Clara agreed, "because at that moment, my survival mattered more than your feelings. I didn't know you. I didn't love you yet. You were just an escape, a chance at something better than slow death in a house that hated me." The raw honesty seemed to shake something loose in Elias. His shoulders sagged, and he sank into a chair like his legs wouldn't hold him anymore. "And now?" he asked quietly. "What am I now?" Clara's breath caught. This was it, the moment to lay everything bare, to give him the complete truth, even if it destroyed her. "Now you're the man I love," she said simply. "You're the person who gave me a home, who treated me with respect, who made me believe I might actually deserve good things. You're Rosie's father, and she's the daughter of my heart, even if not my blood. Her voice broke. You're everything I never knew I needed, and I'm terrified of losing you, both of you. Elias was quiet for so long Clara thought he might not respond at all. Then he raised his eyes to hers, and she saw the war raging behind them, hurt battling with something that might have been hope, anger, wrestling with love. I don't know what to do with that, he said finally. I don't know how to reconcile the woman I love with the woman who lied to me. They're the same person, but they're also not. And I don't... He stopped, jaw working. I don't know if I can get past this, Clara. I want to. God knows I want to. But every time I look at you, I see the deception. I see all the mornings you woke up and chose not to tell me. All the times I opened my heart to you, and you kept yours locked behind lies. I know... Clara felt tears sliding down her cheeks, but didn't bother wiping them away. I know I hurt you. I know I broke something that might not be fixable. But I'm asking you, begging you, don't make Rosie pay for my mistakes. Whatever happens between us, don't take her mother away from her again. You think I want to hurt my daughter? Elias's voice rose. You think this is easy for me? She loves you, Clara. She loves you so much. And when she finds out, she doesn't have to find out. Clara spoke quickly, desperately. Not the details. She can know that things are difficult between us without knowing why. Children don't need to know everything. They just need to know they're loved. So what, we just pretend? Keep living in the same house? Going through the motions, lying to everyone including ourselves? If that's what it takes to protect Rosie, yes. Clara met his eyes steadily. I'll sleep in a separate room. I'll be cordial and distant. I'll give you all the space you need. But please, Elias, please don't send me away. Not yet. Give yourself time to decide with a clear head, not in the heat of anger. Before Elias could respond, the sound of a wagon approaching made them both turn. Through the window, Clara saw Sheriff Mitchell pulling up to the house, and beside him in the wagon sat Victoria and Eloise. What are they doing here? Clara's voice was sharp with dread. Elias stood, his face hardening. I don't know, but they're not welcome. This is my property, and I'll tell them to leave. But before he could move, Victoria was already at the door, knocking with the imperious authority of someone who believed the world owed her entry everywhere. Elias opened it with barely controlled fury. Mrs. Whitmore, I believe I made it clear yesterday that I needed time to handle this privately. Oh, Mr. Grant, I do apologize for the intrusion. Victoria's smile was saccharine. But certain legal matters have come to my attention that simply must be addressed immediately. May we come in? This concerns everyone present. Against his better judgment, Clara could see it in the rigid set of his shoulders. Elias stepped aside. Victoria swept in with Eloise trailing behind, both of them looking around the kitchen with barely concealed disdain. How quaint, Victoria murmured. Clara, you've certainly made yourself at home, though I suppose that was always the plan, wasn't it? What do you want? Clara asked flatly. She had no patience left for Victoria's games. Simply to clarify the legal situation, Victoria produced a sheaf of papers from her handbag. I consulted with a lawyer in town yesterday, and he confirmed what I suspected. The marriage between Mr. Grant and Clara is invalid. You see, the marriage certificate lists the bride as Eloise Marie Whitmore. That's this young lady here. She gestured to the pale blonde hovering by the door. But the woman who actually married Mr. Grant is Clara Ann Whitmore. Two different people, which means, legally speaking, there is no marriage at all. The words dropped like stones into still water, sending ripples of implication spreading through the room. Clara felt the ground shift beneath her feet. Not married. All this time she'd thought at least the marriage was legally binding, that Elias couldn't simply cast her out without going through divorce proceedings. But if the marriage wasn't valid at all? You're saying I'm not married, Elias said slowly. That the ceremony, the certificate, the vows, none of it counts because Clara used her sister's name. Precisely. Victoria looked pleased with herself. Which means you're free, Mr. Grant. Free to correct this unfortunate situation. Free to marry the woman you actually chose, my daughter Eloise. She's here, she's willing, and I'm prepared to forgo any compensation for the inconvenience of Clara's deception. We can have a new ceremony within the week, and everything can be set right. Clara watched Elias's face, trying to read his reaction. Was he relieved? Grateful for an easy way out? Tempted by the chance to have the bride he'd originally wanted, the beautiful, delicate, socially appropriate Eloise instead of the work-worn, deceptive Clara? That's your solution? Elias's voice was quiet, dangerous. You come into my home, announce that my marriage is invalid, and think I'll just, what? Swap one daughter for the other like I'm trading horses? I wouldn't put it quite so crudely, Victoria said, though her smile never wavered. But essentially, yes. You deserve to have what you paid for, Mr. Grant. A proper bride from a good family, not a servant girl with delusions of grandeur. Mother, please. Eloise spoke for the first time, her voice soft and sweet. She moved forward, her eyes on Elias with calculated vulnerability. I know this is all terribly awkward, and I don't blame you if you're angry with our whole family, but I do hope you'll consider giving me a chance. I may not be as capable as Clara, but I'm willing to learn, and I promise I would never deceive you the way she did. The implicit comparison hung in the air, beautiful, honest Eloise versus plain, deceptive Clara. Clara felt something harden in her chest, something that had been soft and hopeful, shriveling into bitter acceptance. Of course Elias would choose Eloise. Any man would. Clara had been a fool to think she could compete with her half-sister's porcelain perfection. But then Elias spoke, and his words were not what anyone expected. Get out of my house. Victoria blinked, her smile faltering. I beg your pardon? I said get out. Elias's voice was steel. You come here with your legal papers and your schemes, thinking you can manipulate me the way you clearly manipulated Clara, thinking I'll just discard one woman for another like they're interchangeable. Well, I won't. Mr. Grant, I really think you should consider— I don't care what you think. Elias moved toward Victoria with controlled fury, and she actually took a step back. You forced Clara into this situation. You sent her here under false pretenses, made her believe she had no other choice, then followed her here to destroy whatever peace she'd managed to build. You're not concerned about legality or propriety. You just can't stand that Clara found something good, something that was hers, away from your control. Victoria's mask of politeness cracked, revealing the venom beneath. How dare you speak to me that way? I am trying to help you. You're trying to help yourself. Elias cut her off. Everything you do is about control and cruelty. Well, you have no control here. This is my home, my land, my family. And whatever problems Claire and I have, we'll solve them without your interference. He turned to Eloise, and his voice softened slightly. Miss Whitmore, I'm sorry you were dragged into this situation. I'm sure none of this is pleasant for you either. But I have no interest in marrying you. I never did, really. I was interested in letters your mother wrote, pretending to be you. If you want my advice, you'll get as far from this woman as possible and build a life that's actually yours. Eloise's pretty face flushed pink. She looked between her mother and Elias, then at Clara, with something that might have been envy or resentment or both. You always were lucky, Clara, she said quietly. Even when you stole something that wasn't yours, you landed on your feet. Lucky? Clara heard herself laugh, a bitter sound. You think I'm lucky? I'm living in a house with a man who can barely look at me, loving a child I might lose at any moment, married to someone who's not actually my husband. That's not luck, Eloise. That's purgatory. Still better than what you had with us, Eloise shot back, and for a moment Clara saw genuine bitterness beneath the sweet facade. You were always Father's favorite, you know. Even after Mother married him, he loved you best, and I hated you for it. The confession stunned Clara into silence. She'd never known, never suspected that Eloise felt anything but pity or disdain for her invisible half-sister. That's enough, Victoria snapped, grabbing Eloise's arm. We're leaving. Mr. Grant, you'll regret this decision. When you come to your senses and realize what you're throwing away— I won't, Elias said firmly. Sheriff Mitchell is waiting outside to escort you back to town and make sure you catch the next eastbound stage. I'd suggest you don't miss it. Victoria drew herself up with as much dignity as she could muster, but Clara saw the fury in her eyes, the rage of a woman whose schemes had been thwarted. You're making a mistake, both of you. That marriage is invalid. which means Clara has no legal claim to anything here, no protection. She's just a woman alone in a territory that doesn't look kindly on that sort of thing. She's not alone, Elias said quietly. She has me. We'll figure out the rest. Victoria's smile turned cruel. Will you? Because from where I'm standing, Mr. Grant, you look like a man who can barely stand to be in the same room with her. That's not the foundation for rebuilding trust. That's the foundation for resentment and regret. With that parting shot, she swept out, pulling Eloise behind her. Through the window, Clara watched them climb into the sheriff's wagon, watched the horses pull away toward town, taking with them the last physical remnants of her old life. The silence they left behind was deafening. Clara stood frozen, trying to process what had just happened. Elias had defended her, had chosen her over Eloise, had sent Victoria away, had said she wasn't alone, but his face was still closed, his body still rigid with anger and hurt. "Why did you do that?" Clara asked quietly. "Why didn't you take the easy way out? You could have had a valid marriage to a woman who never lied to you, a fresh start with no complications." "Because Victoria was right about one thing," Elias said, not looking at her. "I can barely stand to be in the same room with you right now. But that doesn't mean I'm going to let her destroy you. Doesn't mean I'll trade you in like a broken tool just because she offers me a prettier model." "So what does it mean?" Clara's voice trembled. "What happens now?" Before Elias could answer, small footsteps pounded down the stairs, and Rosie burst into the kitchen, dressed but with her hair still wild from sleep. "I heard yelling. Who was here? Was it that mean lady from yesterday?" Her eyes moved between them, reading the tension. "Are you fighting again?" Clara and Elias both started to speak, then stopped, uncertain how to explain any of this to a child. "Your father and I are having some grown-up difficulties," Clara said carefully, "but we're working through them." "Are you?" Rosie looked at Elias. "Papa, are you working through it? Or are you still mad at Mama?" Elias's jaw worked. He looked at his daughter, this child he'd do anything to protect, including staying in a broken marriage, and Clara saw the exact moment he made a decision. "I'm still mad," he admitted, and Rosie's face fell. "But being mad doesn't mean I've given up. It means I need time to heal from being hurt. Can you understand that?" Rosie considered this seriously, then nodded. "Like when I scraped my knee really bad and it hurt for days? You said I had to be patient while it healed." "Exactly like that." Elias's voice was gentle now. All the hardness reserved for Victoria melted away in the face of his daughter's need. Hearts can get scraped too, and they need time to heal. "But you'll stay together while it heals." Rosie looked between them with desperate hope. "You won't make Mama leave." Elias's eyes finally met Clara's, and what she saw there was complicated. Anger still, yes, but also something else. Something that might have been determination, or perhaps just exhaustion. "No one's leaving," he said. "Not today, not tomorrow. We're going to take things one day at a time and figure out how to fix what's broken." Relief flooded through Clara so strongly her knees went weak. Not forgiveness, not yet, maybe not ever, but a chance, a slender thread of hope to cling to. "Okay," Rosie said, satisfied with this answer in the way only children could be. "Then can we have breakfast now? I'm starving." The mundane request broke the tension like a soap bubble popping. Clara found herself almost laughing, almost because the weight of everything was still crushing her chest. But she turned to the stove, cracked eggs into a pan, and focused on the simple act of feeding her family. Because they were still her family, even if the legal documents said otherwise. Even if Elias couldn't forgive her. Even if everything was broken and uncertain and terrifying. They were still her family. The days that followed were strange and painful and oddly domestic all at once. Clara and Elias moved around each other like dancers who'd forgotten the steps, careful not to touch, speaking only when necessary. He slept in his room, she in hers. He worked from before dawn until after dark. She managed the household with ruthless efficiency. They were cordial in front of Rosie, and the child, resilient as children were, seemed to accept that things were different but not destroyed. Mrs. Halloway, arriving for her usual days, took one look at the situation and said nothing, just worked beside Clara with the solidarity of women who understood that sometimes silence was kindness. A week after Victoria's departure, Elias came in from the fields early, Clara was in the kitchen making bread, her hands deep in dough, when he appeared in the doorway. "I've been thinking," he said without preamble, "about what happens next. About us." Clara's hands stilled. This was it, the decision she'd been dreading. She braced herself for him to tell her it wasn't working, that he needed her to leave, that Rosie would be better off with a governess than a fraudulent mother. "I talked to Judge Morrison," Elias continued, "about the marriage, about what Victoria said." "And?" Clara's voice was barely audible. "And he says she's technically right. The marriage as it stands isn't legally valid, but—" He paused, and something in his expression softened slightly. "He also said we could fix it. We could have another ceremony, a proper one, with your real name, make it legal and binding." Clara's heart was hammering so hard she could barely hear her own thoughts. "You want to marry me again, even after everything?" "I don't know if I want to," Elias admitted with brutal honesty. "But I know I'm not ready to give up on us. Not yet. And I know Rosie needs you. I know this ranch needs you. I know—" He stopped, jaw tight. "I know that somewhere under all the lies and hurt, there's something real between us. And I think that's worth fighting for." Tears blurred Clara's vision. She tried to speak, but couldn't force words past the lump in her throat. "I'm not saying I forgive you," Elias continued. "I'm not saying everything's fine. But I'm saying I want to try. I want to see if we can build something true out of the mess we've made. If you're willing." "Willing?" Clara's laugh came out choked with tears. "Elias, I would do anything, anything, to earn your trust back. To be the wife you deserve. To make this real." "Then that's what we'll do." He moved closer, stopping just short of touching her. "We'll start over. No more secrets, no more lies. Just two broken people trying to put the pieces back together." "No more secrets," Clara agreed. No more lies. Just truth, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard." Elias finally reached out, his hand covering hers where it rested on the flour-dusted table. His touch was tentative, careful, like he was relearning how to reach for her. "Judge Morrison can do the ceremony next week. Small, private, just family. Your real name, your real vows, a real marriage." "What about Rosie?" Clara asked. "Does she need to know? About the name? About—" "She needs to know that sometimes grown-ups make mistakes and have to fix them," Elias said. "She needs to know that her mama's real name is Clara, not Eloise. But she doesn't need to know all the ugly details. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Children don't need to carry adult burdens." Clara nodded, grateful for his wisdom. She looked down at their joined hands, his work roughened and strong, hers pale and dusted with flour, and felt the first tiny seed of hope take root. "I love you," she whispered. "I know I don't have the right to say it, and I know you might not believe me, but it's true. I love you, Elias Grant, and I'll spend the rest of my life proving it if you'll let me." Elias was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. "I love you too. That's what makes this so hard. If I didn't love you, the lying wouldn't hurt so much. But I do, and it does. And somehow we have to find a way to live with both of those truths." "We will," Clara said with more certainty than she felt. "One day at a time, one moment of honesty at a time. We'll find our way back to each other." The second wedding was nothing like the first. No fancy dress, no elaborate ceremony, no guests beyond Mrs. Halloway and Sheriff Mitchell serving as witnesses. Just Clara and Elias standing in the parlor while Judge Morrison read the vows. And this time, when he said, "Do you, Clara Ann Whitmore, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" Clara's yes rang out clear and true. Her real name, her real vows, her real marriage. Rosie stood beside them in her Sunday best, holding a bouquet of late autumn flowers she'd insisted on picking. When the judge pronounced them husband and wife, the child let out a cheer that made everyone laugh. "Now you're really truly married," Rosie announced. "And Mama's name is Clara, which is prettier than Eloise anyway. I like it better." "Me too, sweetheart," Elias said softly, his eyes on Clara. "Me too." That night, Clara stood in her room, still separate from Elias's, still giving him space, and looked at the marriage certificate Judge Morrison had left. Clara Ann Whitmore Grant. Her real name, finally, making everything legal and true. A soft knock on her door made her turn. Elias stood in the hallway, his hair damp from washing, his feet bare. I thought, he paused, seeming uncertain. I thought maybe we could talk. Really talk. About everything. About your childhood. About why you believe Victoria. About how we move forward from here. Clara opened the door wider, inviting him in. They sat on the edge of her bed, not touching, still careful, still learning how to be honest with each other, and Clara began to speak. She told him everything. About her father, about the years before Victoria, about the slow erasure of her identity after her father remarried. She told him about Eloise's illness, about Victoria's cruel proposition, about the desperate fear that had driven her onto that stagecoach. And Elias listened. Sometimes his jaw tightened with anger, not at Clara, but at the people who'd made her feel so worthless. Sometimes his eyes grew sad, but he listened to all of it, let her pour out years of pain and fear and loneliness, and didn't interrupt or judge. When she finally fell silent, wrung out and exhausted, Elias reached over and took her hand. Thank you, he said simply, for trusting me with the truth, for letting me see all of you, not just the parts you thought I'd find acceptable. Thank you for listening, Clara whispered, for not turning away. They sat there in the quiet for a long time, hands linked, beginning the slow process of rebuilding what had been broken. It would take time, months, maybe years, to fully heal. But they had time. They had commitment. They had love. Battered, but not destroyed. And that would be enough. 3 months later, Clara stood on the porch, watching the first real snowfall of winter, her hands wrapped around a cup of coffee. The ranch was beautiful under its blanket of white, peaceful and still. Behind her, she could hear Rosie chattering to her father about Christmas plans, her voice bright with excitement. Elias emerged from the house, settling beside Clara on the porch railing. He didn't say anything, just stood close enough that their shoulders touched. Small touches had become their language over these months, gentle, careful rebuildings of physical intimacy. A hand on the small of her back, fingers brushing as they passed dishes, shoulders touching as they sat together in the evenings. Penny for your thoughts, he said after a while. Clara smiled, leaning slightly into his warmth. I was thinking about a story, about a girl who wasn't a princess but wished on the stars anyway. Did the stars answer? They did, but not in the way she expected. Clara turned to look at him, this man who'd chosen to fight for their marriage instead of walking away. They gave her something harder than a fairy tale ending. They gave her the chance to earn one. Elias's arm came around her waist, pulling her closer. And is she happy? This girl in your story? Clara thought about it, about the hard months behind them and the uncertain years ahead, about trust slowly rebuilding, about Rosie's laughter filling the house, about the small moments of genuine connection that grew more frequent each day, about waking up this morning to find Elias had left a cup of coffee on her nightstand before heading out to the barn, a tiny gesture that said more than words. She's getting there, Clara said softly. She's learning that happiness isn't a destination. It's the choice you make every day. The choice to stay, to be honest, to love even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. Mama, Papa, Rosie's voice called from inside. Come see, I drew a picture of our family. They went inside together, Elias's hand finding Clara's naturally, a gesture that had become habit again. Rosie's picture showed 3 stick figures standing in front of a house, smiling suns above their heads. Under it, in careful letters, she'd written, My family, Papa, Mama Clara, and me. God sent her after all. Clara felt tears prick her eyes. She looked at Elias and found him smiling, not the guarded expression he'd worn for weeks after the truth came out, but a real smile, the kind that reached his eyes and made them warm. God sent her after all, he repeated softly, pulling Clara into his side while wrapping his other arm around Rosie. Or the stars. Or just plain luck. Whatever brought you here, Clara. I'm glad you stayed. So am I, Clara whispered, letting herself be held by the family she'd lied to gain.